Do it on the one you got.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check, check.
He's gonna mute us again. There we go. All right. I'd like to call this meeting of the school board, the Shippensburg Area School District, to order. Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Here.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Present.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Here.
Mr. Charlie Suiters. Charlie.
Here.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Here.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Here.
Mr. Arian Gaunkar.
Here.
Miss Lily Kell.
All right, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I just want to note that Mr. Suiters is not with us here today in person, although he is here on the phone, but he is with his daughter, who just had in Nashville, who just had a child. So Mr. Suiters is now a grandfather. As we begin our deliberations this evening, let us once again be reminded of our duty to represent all of the children of this school community, regardless of age, sex, race, or creed, and regardless of need or ability. This meeting is being live streamed and uploaded to the district's YouTube channel. May we now have a moment of silence to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and actions on behalf of the students of the Shippensburg Area School District and in remembrance of Kelsey Reagan, who was a 2014 graduate, Robert Florid, who was a 1944 graduate, Loyetta Kreider, a 1962 graduate, and Edward Bender, who was a graduate. All right, we have one very important piece of business to do, but before we do that, I want to I think we should perhaps approve the agenda. So we're just going to move item 1G up to 1F and approve the agenda first, and then take care of an appointment of a new board member. So do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
I should have asked if there are any changes to the agenda. Do we have any major changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
So because of the recent passing of Mr. Burt, we are required by law to appoint a new member to the board within 30 days of his passing. So in preparation for that, the district advertised for those who were interested in being considered for appointment to the board who live in District C, which is inside the borough of Shippensburg, the Cumberland County portion of Shippensburg, to submit a letter of interest and a resume to the board for consideration. Those letters have been received and distributed to the members of the board, and there are two individuals who expressed interest. Both of those individuals have been invited here today so that if they want, they can say something about why they are interested in being on the board. I also want to note, just for so the public knows, this person, even though Mr. Burt was elected in, 2021, and would have essentially 3 years left on his term, whoever fills this position will only be filling the position until the next municipal election, so until November. So the board will then be appointing a new board member to fill that seat for the next 10 months, essentially. So the process works like this. Those that have expressed interest, we're going to invite you to say a few words to the board about your qualifications and why you should be considered for this position. Then the board is going to vote. We are not allowed to deliberate really in private. We can deliberate publicly, but that would be a little bit awkward. There are positive things to say about both candidates, obviously. So we'll sort of roll call around, and each board member will say the name of the person that they prefer. If it turns out that there is a majority of one candidate, then we will entertain a motion to appoint that person and do another roll call sort of in the affirmative in the regular affirmative style of that motion. So that's the process. So we have two individuals. I guess we could go by alphabetical order. So Mr. Alleman, if you're here and would like to say a few words.
Good evening, Board. My name's Kurt Alleman. I'm a 1996 graduate of Shippensburg School District. Have resided pretty much my entire life here in Shippensburg. I've been very active in the community in many aspects here. Had left the area for a little bit, had served as a school board director in East Pennsboro's school district in the western end of the county. I'm sorry, not the western. I failed my geography, I guess you could say. But spent 4 years on the board there, serving in several capacities. Was very vital in introducing and starting a ad hoc committee on cost savings and revenue generation. And we used that committee. We got community input through surveys and through our meetings where we had a lot of community input in. We implemented several changes that were going to save the district some money during our tight budget times that we were having at that point. One being a 4-day work week for the all year round staff during the summer months, saving us some cost there. During my time on the board also, I was a regional director with the PSBA, which is a vital group that does a lot for the school board directors, as I'm sure most of you are aware, being a member. And I just feel this opportunity gives me a chance to give back to the Shippensburg community again. My knowledge that I can bring to the board, being a former board member in another district, I think can be very vital in helping the community and the district as a whole. So thank you guys very much, and appreciate your time. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Alleman. So there may be questions. It's sort of an unfortunate process that we have here because we've been advised by our solicitor that if we were to ask questions, they would have to be like the exact same questions to each of our candidates.
Understand that. So.
Whatever, so it gets a little complicated. I'm sure people would have questions they would want to know, but it's just a little tricky. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Lyman. I'm sorry, Dr. Lyman.
Hi. I don't have a lot to say because I know these meetings go long anyway. I served on the board with most of you a while ago. It was nice to have a break. I did not want to come back on the board under these kinds of circumstances. Dwayne was a good friend, but I think it's sort of my duty to come back and help if I can, and to. I won't say that I would fill the shoes, but I think it's important to keep the board functioning. Having served not very long ago with most of you, I think I would do a good job. I still have kids in the district. I still care a lot about this district. I just happened to move into the district that Dwayne represented 6 months ago. So there's a lot of serendipity here, and I would be honored to serve the community of Shippensburg again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lyman. All right, so as I said, the process, we have two candidates. So Christy, if you could sort of go around, roll call, but when your name is called, then if you could just indicate the name of the person that you prefer. Thank you.
Mr. Mark Bruderball.
Dr. Lyman.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Dr. Lyman.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Dr. Lyman.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Charlie.
Dr. Lyman.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Dr. Lyman.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Dr. Lyman.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Dr. Lyman.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Dr. Lyman.
Unanimous for Dr. Lyman.
All right, so first off, I want to thank both of you for expressing interest. I'm sure that, you both obviously would bring value to the table here, and I think that the district is lucky to have had two obviously very qualified folks express interest. I just want to thank you both for volunteering your time. That's absolutely noteworthy. So now I'll entertain a motion to appoint Dr. Lyman to the vacant seat on the board.
Motion to approve Dr. Lyman for board seat.
All right, moved by Mr. Bruderbaugh,
Second, Fred Scott.
second by Mr. Scott. Roll call.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Bruderball.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
No.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7 yes, 1 no.
All righty. Thank you again. So we have prepared for this moment. We have the word is escaping me. We have a notary here with us to sort of help take care of this so that Dr. Lyman can take his seat. So I will let our notary guide that process. I thought that was this, but this is
Would you fill out your name and date and sign that, and then we'll
something
go
else.
over that once it's completed. Okay, if you'll repeat after me, please. I, Michael Lyman,
I, Michael Lyman,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and Constitution
and Constitution
of this Commonwealth,
of this Commonwealth,
and that I will
and that I will
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of my office
of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
We're in Franklin, once it route at the middle school. Mhm. That's all, thank you.
We've got a seat for you.
We do question your sanity.
So does my wife.
All righty, so it is now time for public or citizens' comment. We have two comment periods, one for agenda items, which is first, and then we have a second citizens' comment period for non-agenda items, which comes afterwards. If you would like to make a comment, please come forward and identify yourself by name and address and indicate which agenda item you're speaking about. Please address all comments to the board as a whole and make sure they are in the form of a statement. Questions will be taken under advisement. Responses to questions will be offered after due deliberation and will be provided by the superintendent at the direction of the board within a few days of the board meeting. You will be allowed 3 minutes for your comments, 5 minutes if prior notification was made. Comments relative to private student matters or personal issues should be directed to the appropriate school authority outside of this meeting. The presiding officer reserves the right to interrupt or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. There was no one that signed up for this initial comment. Darren, you wanted to speak at the end of the meeting, is that correct? Is there anyone who did not sign up who cares to comment on an agenda item? All right, seeing none, we will move on. All right, it's time for reports. First, student reports. Mr. Gonkar.
First for the high school. On January 19th, the FFA held a hat day where students could donate money to be able to wear a hat at school. All donations were used to help the Keswick Creamery, which had an electrical fire last month. On the same day, a team of teachers and the advanced team sports club went head-to-head in the basketball championship in the high school gym. Christian Pimentel, Angela Kai, and Michael Levy finished in the top 3 in last week's Bebras Logic Problem competition. The school will hold a virtual career trip for students interested in veterinary science pretty soon. Next month, the Shippensburg High School Encouragement Club will be accepting donations to restock our school's paw pantry, which provides personal hygiene items for students in need. The Drama Club will present Shrek the Musical at 7 p.m. on the 26th and the 27th. They'll also be doing a show at 2 and 7 p.m. on January 28th. The Healthcare Career Institute program is accepting applications from sophomores and juniors for the next year's program. The program is open for the Chambersburg Hospital, Penn State Health, and the Holy Spirit Hospital. Now for stuff at the middle school. The Hounds Hut at lunch is now open. Students are excited to be able to purchase treats during lunch. A PBIS celebration day occurred on Friday, January 20th, where middle school students and staff traveled to the high school to participate in fun games such as Spin the Wheel, Guess That Tune, and Deal or No Deal. Middle school clubs are starting on Friday, January 27th. And finally, Student Council is partnering with the Shippensburg Community Resource Coalition with the Be Kind initiative for the month of February. Students will be painting rocks, writing thank yous, and reflecting on who taught them to be kind.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Gonkar. All right, next up is Franklin County Career Center report. Mr. Suiters or Mr. Bard, do you have a report?
I don't have none.
No, none this week.
Okay, thank you. Other committee reports. There are committees that met?
Outreach does.
Okay.
So a couple of different things to report on. First of all, I'm really, really excited to report that the executive director position in our partnership with the Greyhound Foundation is officially posted and open for applications until February 10th. They can apply through the through the foundation website or also through the school's district website. We will be scheduling a meeting to review applications after the closing of that date. Also, another news, I met with Philip Fagan, Josh Deal from the Greyhound Foundation, along with Mr. Eastman from Nancy Grayson Elementary School last week to kind of run the numbers. We have been working on gathering funding to redo the playground over at Nancy Grayson, which is long overdue if Charlie Suter swang on the swings there. So happy to report that we're around 75% of the goal financially for what we need to move that project forward. So we're looking for that probably to have board action in the month of February. And then lastly, I was invited to dinner at the Lions Club. They requested my presence because Mr. Mitchell from Park and Recreation Authority was going to attend, and he was speaking on facilities with Memorial Park. And the Lions Club has an interest in potentially helping to pay for some of the needed renovations over with the bathrooms at Memorial. And Josh is awaiting estimates for the bathrooms. So I just love kind of seeing how the community is starting to really partner together and work on even the smallest of projects, which I think the bathrooms, if you've been to Memorial Park at a Friday night football game, you would all agree that they need to be redone. So I'm just excited to see that some of our community partners are coming together to help support that.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfinger, and thank you to all those on the outreach committee for that work. Are there any other committee reports? I don't believe that there are. All right, so we're now to the superintendent's report. Before I pass it over to our superintendent, I just want to point out that there are 3 items at the end of his report, items 3DC, 3DD, and 3DE, and the last 2 of those we have visitors with us for a presentation, so we're going to kind of slide those up, and 3DC, slide that to the end just to be courteous of their time. And so, Mr. August?
Thank you, Dr. Goetz. First, I just would like to welcome Dr. Lyman and thank Mr. Alleman for his interest. These days, it is awesome when we have citizens that are willing to serve their community, so thank you very much for your time. I'd also like to thank the board. January is Board Appreciation Month, so just taking a moment to thank all of you for your time and your service. They're long hours, and it's often a thankless job. But you're truly making a difference for the community and our school. There are some gifts, some notes from students written in appreciation, and a few small tokens that don't outweigh the balance of what you give in time, effort, and energy. So thank you all for your service. First up is the donation report. Just would like to run through and acknowledge the receipt of some donations. Roxbury Treatment Center, $500 donation towards the middle school dog program, facilities dog. Shippensburg Middle School staff and faculty, $200 donation from their Christmas jewelry sale to support the facility dog. An anonymous $50 donation to support this Shippensburg High School dog program. And Andico Inc., $136 donation towards the middle school PBIS program. And Shippensburg area band boosters donating Liberty 1 2.6 octave glockenspiel, which is sounds like a pretty impressive instrument, with damper bells and a Yamaha Stage Custom Birch 5-piece shell pack, 20-inch drum bass set for use by our band. Music instruments are not cheap, and so that is an $1,827 donation. So thank you so much to our band boosters for that. 3DB is activity account balances, and we like to report that out to the board on a quarterly basis. You can see the numbers for each of the buildings. Senior high has $87,825.19. Middle school, $47,802.94. The intermediate school, $14,292.82. Jamesburg, $2,366.89. And Nancy Grayson, $8,910.69. And the attached balances are there for your review. At this time, as part of my report, we are still wrestling with those facility questions, and we finally got some updated information on our enrollment, which will inform, our construction projects. EI has completed that, and I've invited them here to present their findings. So I'll turn it over to Adam and Ann from EI.
Good evening. Adam Kerr with EI Associates, and I have Ann Long here with me as well. A few months ago, We discussed the facilities here, had a presentation with Site Logic, and you put us under the charge to go ahead and start some conceptual design on the high school and the middle school. About that same time, what we found out was, the enrollment this year ticked up, as we know. So we had a net gain of a fair amount of students. So while we were starting this conceptual design on the middle school and the high school to understand what those needs were, we wanted to pause and look at that enrollment and to evaluate that district-wide, not only in respect to the high school and middle school, but also elementary and the 4 and 5. So we've done that. So I know it's been a couple months since we've been in front of you. It's a bit of a process. There's a lot of fact-finding and information digging that we've done on our end, and we want to present our findings of those enrollment considerations tonight. So from an overall standpoint, just want to kind of touch on the overview of the process, overview and process. Want to hit on the projections, obviously, and then just some considerations as how we arrived at, what our recommendations are, as well as, dovetailing that into our current efforts of design on the middle school, high school, and beyond. So, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So just from an overview, and just a reminder that we had completed enrollment and update projections back in 2019. So, a couple years ago, but, a lot changes in a number of years within a district. As we know, now this is the October 1st enrollment, there was a net gain of 167 students in the district this year. But, that can be a bit cyclic. We also want to note that just a couple years ago, kind of, around that COVID year, there was a loss of 105 students. So it does tend to, kind of go ebb and flow a bit. But, as we know this year, we did have a significant increase. So as I mentioned, we want to review and evaluate that in relation to the district-wide facility improvements. And while we were doing this enrollment update, we were also continuing to work with the principals and the staff at each school in developing a list of priorities and needs at each of the facilities. So there are essentially three methods that we look at when performing the enrollment update. Method one is the Pennsylvania Department of Education, their projections. Method two is a kindergarten district-wide projection. Method three is the housing starts within the district. And ultimately, we're looking to, create, we recommend a 10-year enrollment projection. And again, that's, as we know, projections, it's our best guess is what after 10 years those numbers will look like. So method one, this is the PDE district-wide projection. This is available from PDE. This is based upon what they call live birth data within the district. This does not include or may not include in-migration trends for students moving in or out of the district. This is really looking at that live birth data within the district. PDE actually shows a lower current student population than what the October 1st enrollment shows. And PDE also shows that that student population actually decreasing over the 10-year. If you go to the next slide. Method two, this is the kindergarten district-wide projection. Again, this is based upon the number of kindergarten students over a 5-year period. So we look at, how many kindergarten students are coming up in the district and then ultimately continuing through those grades as one of our projection method. Now this data shows that we would be seeing a 10-year projection, an increase in enrollment over a 10-year projection. And then method three, this is the housing starts. So this is based upon the available and potential new housing data within the district. We look at this one more of a comparison method for methods 1 and 2. We did gather data from, we did receive information from the municipalities in a district from Cumberland and Franklin County. So we did work with all of their staff and include this as part of the projection. This data also, after we reviewed it, we project an increase over a 10-year period based upon the housing starts. This is a slide with your current enrollment. So a couple of things to note here. The red highlights, those are peak enrollment. As you can see, it's sort of all over the map a little bit, but back in 2010 to 11, there was a peak. And of course, here in 2022, 2023, there's a peak as well. And then we've also highlighted some of those kindergarten numbers. Those are some of the higher numbers within the last number of years. And again, we use that as one of the methods for projection. Finally, the only thing I'd note here is that almost every one of your grades has a retention ratio, which is above 1, which means that it's always indicating a net gain in the number of students progressing to the next grade level. Next slide. The projection in 2019 for this year, we actually, back a couple years, we were looking at somewhere between, those are the numbers there, 3,463 to 3,486. Currently we're at about 3,536. So we're kind of, trending a little bit higher than what our projection was a couple of years ago. Next slide. So again, these are the actual enrollment projection updates that we have here. This is the PDE district-wide projection. Again, based on live birth data alone, does not include any in-migration trends in or out of the district. Interestingly, this shows a decline over the 10 years. And when we evaluated it back in 2019, that also showed a decline as well, even though the numbers are going up.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yes.
So just to make sure that I understand method 1, we're looking at the past 5 years of live births in the district, and we're creating a kind of linear trend line using those 5 years of data and projecting into the future based just on that.
Yeah, and this data is from PDE, correct?
Okay.
Students that are born, that will be going into
Talk into the microphone.
Sorry, the students that were born that will be going into kindergarten. So it's a little bit more than 5 years. And then PDE actually makes a projection on what they see the births doing. And that's why we're getting, even though you see those ratios up there at a 1.01, even though those are higher, the projections are that the live births are going to decrease in the future.
So just to be clear, so we're saying that we're expecting less children to be born to current residents in the district in the next several years.
Correct.
Okay. Which I guess means, let's get to the other methods, right? But if we're projecting growth, then it means that the growth is coming from people who have their kids outside the district and then move into the district with
That is
either
true.
younger than kindergarten age kids, or as we can see with some of the ratios, suggesting that they come in with kids of school age already, and that's contributing to our growth.
Yes, that is true. And it's also, there are approximately 28 to 30% of students that live in the district that aren't going to district schools. So those numbers can account for the next methods also.
Sorry, will you say that again? 20 to 30% of school-age kids living in the district do not go to
Aren't attending
Shippensburg
district
area
schools. Yeah, in 2010, that number was 20%. But it's going up over the years, so more and more students that do live in the school district aren't going to district schools. That's why we can see a trend of students being able to come back to the district schools.
Thank you.
How big an impact did COVID have on this students going and coming?
It started growing before COVID. I noticed like about 2017, those percentages were going up. So actually what happened is it went up 1% in 2020, then slid back down a little bit. So I think it's gonna hold above 20%, more in that 25 to 28% is what it's looking like.
Okay, next slide. So this is the projection looking at the method 2, which is the kindergarten, starts over that 5-year period. And, you know, when we take those lines, we look at the retention ratios and so forth, we do see over a 10-year period, we do see a growth of, now this chart shows somewhere in a range of 3,947 students. But, you know, that is an increase from where we are today at 3,586 students. And then method 3, similarly, you know, it shows this trend upwards of 3,856. You know, again, and we'll show a little bit more information as far as some of the numbers. You can see where the trends are in terms of the housing starts within the district. So this is, you know, a little bit more detail on the district population. You know, we've circled in red, you know, looking back at the census data, so 2000, 2010, and most recently 2021, you can see some growth every decade that's consistent. You know, one, just total population, but also the numbers in school-age children years 5 through 17. And then this is the household information. Similar charts, you know, looking at the 2000, 2010, and 2021 U.S. Census data, again, showing total housing units and owner-occupied units trending in the up direction. So a couple considerations, you know, in terms of the actual, you know, what we're recommending in terms of, you know, enrollment projections. You know, over the 10-year period, if the projections hold, there could be some growth in the district, some continued growth in the district. You know, initial recommendation for the 2023-2024 school year is, you know, there could be consideration potentially to discuss grade realignment at the elementary schools. You know, in our experience, you know, there's some benefits there with the ability for team teaching. That can also assist with some of the bubbles. You know, if you have all of the children in one school, you know, if you have a large bubble year coming through, you have a little bit more capacity in that center to accommodate that growth, and it just, you know, allows us to balance the class sizes a little bit better if we were to create centers potentially. Other facility improvement recommendations could include some potential additions at the elementary schools, potential alterations, and a small classroom addition at the intermediate. And we've been discussing the alterations and the additions at the middle school and high school, similar to previous conversations and some of what we had discussed a number of months ago. So these are some graphs that basically show ultimately the four colors we want to, you know, kind of care about. You know, I should say more like 3 colors. So our recommendation is, you know, that this projection could be increasing over the 10 years. You know, the red line is your current facilities, right? So that's basically, you know, what your capacity is right now. And what we see is that cyan and green colors, that could be the trend over the 10 years. So when we look at trying to look at facility upgrades, we ultimately want to get that red line up closer to where those, over a 10-year period, where those other colors, the cyan and the green, could potentially be. So this graph shows what we call status quo. So this shows, you know, your current facilities and how many students we believe that can adequately serve. So, you know, this year, you know, we're kind of right there. We have a couple gaps. I know we're tight at some schools, but over that 10-year period, if those enrollment projections do come true, we will need to look at some potential upgrades to handle that capacity. So next slide. So, you know, what we did is we simulated a couple options here. This would be, you know, potential grades K-3 realignment, and the current, what we call phase 1 middle school improvements, which are underway. Again, this starts to close the gap on some of those red line on the elementary side, moving closer to the lines above it. If you go to the next slide. This is K-3 grade alignment and additions and potential other additions at the schools. As you can see, this gets us pretty close. This gets us into a zone where that red line is pretty much up at the green and cyan colored lines there. And then finally, we did look at an option with K-3 additions with no realignment, and then again additions at your other schools. And it's still very close. You can see there on the top left the K-3 enrollment and capacities. It's close, but a little extra space won't hurt there. So next slide. And then these are basically, if you look at status quo there is on the left. This is a summary of all the schools and looking at total capacity. So sort of highlighted the what's in red there as far as total capacity. So if you look at, there's a status quo. Option 2 is if we did grade realignment and the phase 1 middle school improvements, again, moving that trend up towards the 3,900 students, not quite there yet. And then if you go to the next slide there, that shows us, with potential additions to, most of your schools, that's starting to get us up towards that 3,800 student capacity. So I think we're, yeah. So questions?
Yes. You telling us our excuse me, 10 years, 15 years, our facilities will not be able to handle what our present facility will not be able to handle what we're getting?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, over a 10-year period, if those numbers hold, if we are looking at 3,800 to 3,900 students, at present at those numbers, that would start to become difficult. That capacity.
So we need now to plan for the future.
Correct.
Yes, just to remind everyone, when we started in 2019, we were looking at these higher capacities. We were looking at 300 to 325 students per grade, which we're not there yet. And even with the higher projections, the elementary schools will just skim under those. So when you're looking at that red line, which is the functional capacity of the schools, and then you're looking at the PDE capacity, which also takes into account some bubble classrooms, but you really want to look at that red line, which is the functional capacity.
So I'm kind of swimming in this data, right? I mean, there's a ton of stuff here, and I'm trying to understand the methodology, but going back to the first slide of, I guess it's slide 16 maybe, the first one that has a bunch of graphs on it. There you go. So I seem to be noticed with that green, and I think you called it cyan.
Cyan.
Yeah.
Blue. Turquoise.
Yeah, that's a word I'm more familiar with. So you're looking at the green and the turquoise lines, you kind of have this immediate bump, right? In the next 2 years, it's a pretty aggressive jump, if I'm reading this correctly, and then a pretty mild, sort of pace after that. So I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to wrap my head around the methodology that gives us kind of this big push. I'm looking at the K3 data in particular, and then like a kind of bubble, and then what looks to be just kind of, I don't know, sort of. I mean, I recognize that it's hard to look out into the future, but just a sort of, baseline conservative trend upward after that. So can you help me understand that, what accounts for that bump, and then like the change in the I guess the slope of the line?
Yeah, the numbers are coming from the progression, and then basically the retention ratios. So we're adding a number of students, through the K3, and then that goes through the retention ratios, which are just above those ones, so that it kind of levels out a little bit, but it still keeps increasing.
Are there other questions?
Yeah. So some of these questions will be for you, some of these might be for August or even Sherry. I guess the first one is, one of the recommendations you said we could look at for like the next school year would be transferring from like K1 and 2, 3, separating those buildings. I've had some mild discussions with some people about that, and I understand that. But what would the removal of pre-K out of our buildings do? Would we be able to, because that to me seems like a really large jump for us if it's almost February. Try to like plan all that. It'd be easier for like the short term that we just say, hey, maybe pre-K moves out as we continue to look at this and move forward. To me, that seems like the easiest, quickest fix, rather than completely realigning our buildings.
So I'm with you, Mr. Chris. We've already contacted pre-K to let them know that it's unlikely that we'll be able to house them next year, in anticipation to get a little bit of breathing room with space. Not my favorite thing to do, not my favorite call to make, but they are aware ahead of the line. I, like you, don't know that we have capacity to make that change as quickly, over a summertime. I mean, it's a big change for everyone if the board decides to go that way. In my thinking, and Ann and Adam may have different opinions. The intermediate step is pre-K, and then to give us some lead time if that's the direction we want to go. I don't know that we're going to be able to pull it off for next year.
So that idea totally makes sense to me. So I guess the next part of that would be, as you look to make that, like, internally, how does that impact like our transportation? Because I can't imagine that's going to be something that's real easy. I feel like that's going to be a bit of a headache for us to figure out how we get kids.
Sherry, do you want to field that one?
So for transportation, we've been discussing this for years as options. And transportation, because the Grayson students go over to SACE, like that bus drops students off at Grayson and then heads over to SACE, it really won't do much for transportation wise. I mean, we're going to have to add some time for our routes, but it should be fairly simple because those buses are already going to Grayson, dropping off kids, and then going over to SACE. So they would have to go to Grayson, drop off some kids, Jamesboro, drop off some kids, then SACE to drop off some.
That makes sense. And going back to what you said in the beginning about like I can't remember how you worded it. Basically, everybody gets on the same page, like K through 1. There's obviously some differences in the buildings. I mean, it's human nature. So I like the idea of K1, 2, 3. I just don't know that I like the idea starting in August 24th, whenever we start school.
Understood. It takes a lot of planning. There's a lot of prep work. The actual physical movement of the teachers over is a heavy lift. For our maintenance folks, it's not. Obviously, it's not something we can just flip a switch with and move. We want to give the community time to process and get input on it, and get those plans worked out.
Sounds good.
Has there been any discussion at all? Because for me, I'm thinking from a budgetary standpoint of not having to go the route of having 2 projects in motion at both elementary schools, and doing the addition onto the intermediate school and moving just 3rd grade out of both elementary schools into the intermediate school. To me, it seems like it would be a more cost-effective strategy to only have to manage 1 project. And I think it would free up the space in both of the elementary schools, and you're only dealing with 1 project.
So, Ms. Wolfinger, what I would say to that is, the plans that we currently have on the table don't have any. We don't have any elementary plans. This is kind of like the first shot that we need to look at that. And certainly those we can weigh a bunch of different options. I would lean on EI for direction on that.
Yeah, and our next step is, one, I know this is a lot of information to digest and to look at. So, but, this is the time to do it. We're in a conceptual design phase. So we're going to present the numbers, and our next task here, and we've been working on it, is to look at the priorities and then come with options. And not, what those options look like in architecturally, and what those options look like from a financial standpoint. Those are our next action items, that we can look into different scenarios where, to your point, we can look at, perhaps some different things. Does grade 3 move? Is it grade centers? Is it no grade we'll have numerous options that we can present.
I mean, help me if I'm misinterpreting this, but I mean, we've been sort of discussing amongst us maybe some nightmare scenarios of having to, add 2 or 3 classrooms to each of our K through 3 buildings. But based on these projections over the next 10 years, I mean, even the most aggressive projections, I mean, it depends on the grade, but some grades, it's like less than 10, and some grades, it's maybe 40. So we're talking anywhere from potentially 0 to 2 classrooms per grade at these elementary school levels. So definitely an increase, but not like a crazy increase.
And part of that is, the way we want to plan is to effectively manage those bubbles. If you have that large class that's coming through, we want to make sure that as that grade level moves for all your facilities over their 12 years of education, we want to make sure that we've effectively managed that bubble to move through at all the grade levels. So that is part of the numbers here and some of the logic that we have with the facilities.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sort of thinking out loud, but you look at grade realignment, and that frees up some space. I'm not sure exactly how much, and it would depend on the grade, but, anywhere from, I imagine, a fraction of a classroom to a full classroom of space per grade. And then, I don't know, I mean, it just seems like if you got like maybe 1 extra classroom, you're essentially satisfying the needs unless I'm missing something.
Correct. When you basically do the grade realignment to the centers, you end up with an extra classroom per grade without taking away special education and some of your other support classrooms. So it allows for that equity in a bubble better than if you're looking at each K-3 attendance area. So when you bring everyone together, you can handle those bubbles better than when you've got 2 separate schools trying to handle independent bubbles, which one school might be getting all the new students, and then the other school isn't, just because of the attendance areas. So.
And I've solved that problem. I've lived that problem in another life, and how you balance that otherwise is you put kids on shuttles. And they don't attend their home school, because you say grade 4 at Grayson is closed. So any additional grade 4 kids have to get on a shuttle bus and go to a different school, which is not ideal. So there are options, I think to Ann's point, to everyone's point, there are options for dealing with this. We're just going to have to pick the one that works best and the one that we can afford.
Well, this obviously isn't a problem we're going to solve tonight, but I just want to make sure that I was understanding the data correctly so that as we, think about this and digest it, we can, that'll direct our decision making. So before we let you go, does anyone else have any questions?
I just have a question for Bill. I don't mean to put the spotlight on you, but I guess I will anyhow. Because we've been talking about this way back since 2013 and 14. Is the administration going to be recommending realignment, or are you still looking at realignment?
So we're currently looking at it. We have to digest. We're going to sit down and see. I want to give the board some options, and I asked Adam and Ann to put on the no grade realignment and what that will mean on the construction side. So it's really like you're pulling one side to pull the other. In my mind, you're either grade realigning and having fewer classrooms added to these buildings, or you're not grade realigning and you're adding more classroom space to those existing buildings, or looking at a different configuration as well, moving 3rd grade to another building. My original thought in looking at the classroom needs, I think, from Adam and Ann's projections, we're looking at 2 to 4 classrooms per those elementary buildings with grade realignment. We're looking to 4 to 6 without grade realignment. So, it's 6 one, half dozen the other. Having said that, Mr. Butterball, I can say I see a lot of instructional value in having grade levels together when it comes to consistency of instruction and the ability for teachers teaching the same subjects to collaborate. It's really difficult to get Grayson teachers and Bird teachers who teach second grade together to work on things. There are a lot of advantages academically to that realignment. And it just opens up a bunch of really great doors, kind of what we see at we're already kind of grade realigned, at SACE. They certainly have an interesting approach of teaming with and I think, when I walk to that building, I do sense a lot of collaboration happening there between, teachers, which is what we want. So long-winded, it is tantalizing for me to look at that grade realignment. But I know that comes with some drawbacks, and people have, strong opinions. I'm not ready to put my flag in the ground yet. I'd like to hear the numbers and see what all these cost, and then bring those forward to the board, with my recommendation.
Thank you.
This is 2023. 2020, 33. What's the future? For me, is you adding on these classrooms, like I don't think Nancy Grayson got any room to add on to. What do we do? How do we prepare for those additional classrooms when we don't have the room for those classrooms?
Well, that's what we have to plan. I mean, we have to give you options of what that looks like. So, sometimes it's not always horizontal. So we have to give you options, and that's our next step. So, we're gonna leave here tonight, and starting this week, we're gonna be looking at, and we have been looking at some of the program again for all the schools. But now it's really time to pull together some cost and some plan options that we can review and evaluate, and ultimately come with some recommendations. So.
And I would just say, that we've spun our wheels is not maybe the right term, but we've got to make some decisions soon. Across, and I know every board member realizes that and wants that to happen. And our next presentation is going to kind of fill in some gaps on that as well, about what our capacity is and what we can do. I would just encourage the board to understand, we're not here to solve necessarily every single problem. We know what the needs are. We're going to know what our financial capacity is, and then we're going to make those best decisions, for our kids, setting this board up and future boards up for success within the constraints that we have.
Thank you, Adam and Ann.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So on a night of heavy numbers, we'd like to switch gears to the financial side. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you tonight, but these things go hand in hand. You've just heard about the enrollment needs and what our facility capacity is for the district. And so I've invited Jamie Doyle from PFM to talk about our current borrowing capacity and where we stand and her recommendations to the district. So without further ado, Jamie.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. You should each have a hard copy of my presentation at your places. And before I get started, just a couple of general comments to put in the back of your mind. But you should always let the project drive the financing and not the other way around. So, you know your priority list and what is most needed here at the district. So as you continue to provide us with information, we'll continue to refine the examples that we're going to go through this evening, because these are just meant to be examples and certainly not anything exact at this time. This will require a lot more customization. If you look at page number 2, which is the inside cover, I always like to start off talking a little bit about market conditions. And this page may look familiar to some of you that have been on the board for a while, but it's 3 snapshots of the same index. This is the MMD curve, which stands for Municipal Marketplace Data. And what the top snapshot tells us is we're currently at the blue line. So when you look at the front end of the yield curve, and I'll call that years 1 and 2, you can see we're currently above historic averages, which is great because it means you're starting to actually earn something on your investments. And that's important, and we're going to talk about that more as we go through this handout. And then you'll notice it kind of crosses over in year 3. And for the rest of the yield curve out through and including year 30, we're below historic average rates, which may come as a surprise to some of you. There's certainly no shortage of doom and gloom economic news out there these days. The middle snapshot shows you this same index going all the way back to 1993 to give you a more historic perspective. And I would point out on the left-hand side of that middle graph, the blue line that says current. This index, and this is a 10-year spot index. This is not meant to be indicative of the rate that you'd lock in, but it's currently at 2.21%. And if you go over in the next column, 75.28% of the time between now and 1993, when this chart begins, were rates higher than they are today. Again, that might surprise some of you. About 1/4% of the time they were lower. And then we drew a red box around the last 2 full calendar years on the right-hand side of that middle chart, and we blew that box up. That's the bottom chart. It's a blow up of that red box. So you could get a bird's eye view of what has happened in the market calendar year 2022 through present. And basically, if you look toward the right on that bottom chart, you can see that interest rates have been trending downward pretty rapidly since November of this year. So that's all good news when you're thinking about what projects you might want to finance. If you look at page 3, we're going to look at a couple of scenarios this evening, but the initial scenarios that we'll look at keeps your debt service the same as it currently is, meaning you'd need no new dollars, no new mills to support that additional debt service. We've also assumed that there's no new state reimbursement for new projects. And so if something happened on that front and PlanCon were funded, that would make all of this look better. And then that third bullet's really important as we look through these scenarios. Any projects that are procured under Act 39, so that's your energy savings projects, ESCO is an acronym, or GESA, Guaranteed Energy Savings Agreements, are limited to 20-year amortization. So we're taking that into consideration as well, that you may be doing some of those. In that second section, just a reminder on federal tax law, the key words are reasonable expectations. So in order to borrow tax-exempt money, you must have reasonable expectations that you can spend 85% of the borrowed proceeds within 3 years, that within 6 months of settlement, you can incur a substantial binding obligation to spend at least 5%. Usually that's your architect's contract or your ESCO contract or your GESA contract. And then the third prong of that test is just that you proceed with due diligence on whatever projects you've selected. I won't belabor the third bullet point. It's just a reminder that if and when you're ready to proceed with a borrowing, there would be a parameters resolution, just like what we've historically done in prior borrowings for the district. And that is just to preserve flexibility. The parameters resolution lets us enter the market on the best day possible, as opposed to being wed to a board meeting date, which might only be 1 or 2 days out of the month. I won't belabor that because that's a little further down the road. If you look at page 4, this is a snapshot of your existing debt portfolio. So if you do nothing additional, your debt service requirements are the top half of the page, meaning principal and interest on each of your outstanding issues, through and including the series of 2022 that you issued last year. And the bottom half of the page is your local share that affects your budget annually after you receive some state reimbursement on some of your older issues. And you can see which issues I mean. If you look close to the bottom, there's a line that says PE percentage. If there's a number on there, that's the percent of that particular project that was eligible for PlanCon reimbursement under the old program, and that's grandfathered still today on those issues. The flexibility that I'm referring to that this district has compared to a lot of Pennsylvania school districts out there, if you look down column 14, you can see your level at about 1.5 million right now, and you can see it drops off as you look down column 14, drops off pretty significantly in 2031. We've intentionally structured the series of 22 the way we did, knowing that you had additional future needs. So, the fact that the district has done a great job of keeping the debt service line item in the budget where it was and used to be is really a great help as you think about what other projects you might want to finance. And we, of course, monitor this page for refunding opportunities at all time. If any made sense, I would be in touch with your administration. So let's look at page 5. This is the first example. And so again, you can see I'm going to start in column 7. There's a yellow box. That's the number I was just referring to. The district has roughly $3.4 million in its budget right now available for debt service on that debt service line. And you can see in column 7, your existing local effort. The blue column is labeled actual. That's the roughly $10 million that the district borrowed in 2022 already. And that is sort of spoken for and allocated toward projects already. And then we have a thick black line. And we did that very intentionally because if you stopped, today you're at column 9. Everything to the right of column 9 is what could be available for additional projects. And again, all of this will get refined as you decide what you'd like to do, and as we get draw schedules from your architect, we will resize and time the issues so that your cash flow needs are met on your projects. But in the red column in this example, you can see there's roughly a $12.75 million issue. You can see down below in column 10 what that debt service might look like. That's a slightly conservative estimate today. You can see in the following calendar year, May of 2024, an additional $10 million borrowing in the green column. And then lastly, a roughly $10 million in the orange in calendar year 2025. And again, just a reminder, $10 million or per calendar year gets you the lowest possible bank qualified interest rate. So again, all of this needs resized and the timing needs tweaked based on what you decide to do. But in this example, in box 5, that would give you $32,745,000 of additional projects that you could do and still keep your debt service payment the same $3.4 million that you already have in your budget. So what I mean by that is you look down column 17, you see it's roughly level at $3.4 million after you get past those first couple of phase-in years. And as you look to the bottom of column 17, you can see that the final payments occur in 2047 with still some substantial drop-offs as early as 2046. So this option gets you about $32.75 million, and each borrowing is capped at 20 years in case you decide to do all ESCO projects, and or in case the projects you decide to do only have useful lives of 20 years. So this is pretty conservative. Most Pennsylvania school districts are going longer than 20 years today if their projects allow for it. If we flip to the next page, page 6, and each of these options sort of build on one another as we think about, what different strategies get us in the way of borrowing capacity. So everything looks pretty much the same in the black columns, 6 through the blue columns ending 9. And now you can see that it's the same 3-step borrowing, only it's for a larger borrowing in the green column. That's larger by about $4,065,000. And we still keep your payments in column 17, all in level around the same $3.4 million. And all we did is we extended the borrowing a little bit. So now you'll see your final payments. There's no drop-offs until after the fiscal year ending 2050. So we stretched it out a little bit and filled in a little bit more on the end. We broke it out in box number 5. If you went out this extra couple of years, that means is you'd have to have at least $15,675,000 of projects that were traditionally bid. Because the difference in that 20-year hard stop and amortization has to do with the procurement process on any ESCO or GISA projects. So you'd have to have at least $15.675 million of traditionally bid projects to go out to 2050. But that gets you an extra $4,065,000 if you so choose, and keeps your payment the same. The last scenario we looked at on page 7 is we said, okay, what does this look like if we still go out to 2050, just like the prior option? But what if there's an additional $300,000 added to that debt service line? So now column 17 levels off at about $3.7 million instead of $3.4 million. And it takes a couple years to get there. There's a bit of a phase in, but you hit the $3.7 million in this example in 2027. So an increase of $300,000 gradually over time means if you started in the next budget year, you have 4 years to get it phased in. That's about $75,000 a year. The last page, on page 8, may look familiar. There's a sample motion for your consideration if or when you'd like to proceed. We would like more information from you so that we can refine and customize these as far as sizing and timing. But you can see in that sample timeline at the bottom of the page, even if you said go here in pretty short order, it would be about April until you could get to settlement. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of how long it takes before money would actually be available in your construction fund to undertake projects. The other comment I'd like to make is in terms of cash. These days many districts have some cash that they're thinking about contributing to part of a project, and that's great. But in general terms, you always want to save your cash for last. If you're going to use cash, you want to use it to downsize the very last borrowing, if you have a multi-step plan like we're illustrating here, because whatever that last borrowing is, that's the one that has the greatest interest rate risk because it's the furthest away. The other reason that you want to preserve your cash for as long as possible is, this is the first time in probably over a decade, over 12 years, that the investment rates are higher. You can actually earn a little bit more than the rate that you'd lock in on a borrowing. So as long as we meet all of the tests and rules, you're allowed to keep that positive spread or those positive earnings, if you will. And so again, you can put your cash to work, earning money, and see how things go over the next couple of years, and ultimately how your projects go, how your contingency holds out if it's traditionally bid projects, and make those final decisions further down the road when you're more toward the end of whatever you decide you'd like to tackle. So again, I know that's a ton of information. I tried to keep this at a high level, and we will continue to customize it as we get more information from you and the architect. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
So one question, you've mentioned several times, I think we all understand that if we can borrow in $10 million chunks, that there's a kind of economic advantage. I'm curious, is there a timeline between those chunks that is necessary? Is that like an annual?
It's a calendar year. It's per calendar year. Mm-hmm.
So last calendar year, we borrowed one of those $10 million chunks. So if we want to move on, then this would be the year. We would probably want to do this sometime before the end of the calendar year. And you're saying a 4-month window to make it happen. So at the very latest, we'd need to be rolling in September in order to get that $10 million chunk this year. But it may be that we need more than a $10 million chunk to take on whatever project we're taking on, in which case that's just the way we do it.
Right. And to your point, it's calendar year. So if you wanted to, I'm not saying that you do, but you could literally settle on $10 million on December 31st and another $10 million on January 2nd or whatever the first business day of
Kind
January
of a sneaky way to get a $20 million project at a
So
cheaper rate.
they're not necessarily a whole year apart.
Yeah, that's useful information.
Tell me, the bond we have, it started out at 59 million. Do you know? Did it start out at $59 million? Our bond?
The bond that you just took out in 2022?
No.
I think you mean
You're talking about the total project cost.
Total cost.
Like the original projections, Jamie.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'd have to look back to get that exact number. It was a higher number originally.
So we're losing money as the time goes through interest rates and that?
Well, it's if you're trying to keep your payment the same.
Yes.
And interest rates go up, yes, you have less that you can borrow and still keep your payments the same. The other thing that really moves that number is how long you amortize the debt over. So if you're, if you do all ESCO projects and you have a hard stop at 20 years and you want to keep your payment the same, you're going to be able to borrow less.
So that 39 million where we're at now?
Right.
So it went from 59 to 39.
Well, but you already borrowed 10 and 22. I kind of separated it for this handout, but you would add, to
That
be
10.
compared to the original, you would add that 10 million back in.
So we lost $10 million.
Part of it is because we shortened a good bit of this because we hear you talking about some potential ESCO projects. It's something close to that number, but yes, correct.
But not all due to interest rates.
Not all due to interest rates. When we did those original projections, they went out further.
So you say take $10 million every year. So we would continue to lose money until we use it all, right? Because it's sitting there in that pot, interest rates be sucking out one side and we're sucking out the other.
Well, but interest rates have been moving in our favor here recently, so, but yes, interest rates are sort of one of the moving pieces, and then the length of the amortization is the other important moving piece. And then, of course, timing, because your draw schedule, which bond counsel is going to want to see a draw schedule in order to know that you're really meeting those reasonable expectations tests that I mentioned. So, depending on what that draw schedule looks like will kind of depend on the sizing and the timing. And to that point, that draw schedule will also help us project the interest earnings in your construction fund. Right now, none of these plans include any interest earnings that you might earn in your construction fund. Once we get the draw schedule, we'll be able to project those, and then ultimately we can use those to downsize the final borrowing as well.
So that's what I'm saying. So the sooner we get moving on what we're going to do, it's better for you. If we tell you we're going to do this, we're going to do that, that helps you?
Yes, the more information you give me, the more I'll be able to make this efficient and customize it for you.
Defining the project is the key.
Yes.
We've got to define this project to, and include, all of, the grand scheme of everything that we want to do with facilities. We've got to define it so that Jamie can do her work. And the more efficient we are in doing that, and in that window, and my office is filled with plans. We've got to get down to matching the enrollment needs with this fiscal reality, and make those decisions. That's what Adam and Ann and I and SiteLogic are going to start Wednesday, to give you options to consider, and pull apart and give us feedback so that we can get it defined. Okay, we know what the needs are at the high school. We've addressed the needs at the middle school. It's really about what can we do at the high school, or what can we do extra at the middle school, and then what are the needs at these three other buildings. So lots of things in motion. My goal is to get things in front of you for you to consider, and point us in the direction of making a decision so we can get rolling on getting things rolling. Currently stuff's going on in the middle school, and that's exciting. We've got to keep that process rolling.
I understand that. And I'm just, the fact that we've lost money. We lost considerable more. We're not talking $1.50. We're talking millions of dollars we've lost from the time we started to. That's not your fault. And that
Interest rates were lower when we first started the discussion.
So no matter what we plan or do, we only got so much money. So the longer we wait, less plan we're going to get.
I mean, Fred, she has this nice graph right here on the first page.
I'm not a college professor, so I'm looking at it. I don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about. So she has to talk to me, tell me plain English. That graph might be good for you, but it means nothing to me.
Well, what she's saying is, speaking to your point partially, you see how low that line is there at the left on that bottom graph? That's winning the lottery. Because if you were to borrow money during that period, which was essentially like a 0% interest rate, that is cheaper money than at any time in the past 30 years.
Okay.
where we presently are is still cheaper money than most of the last 30 years. It is a little bit more expensive to borrow money now than it was a year ago, but in the grand scheme of things, not really that much more expensive. And it's trending downward, so it's becoming cheaper to borrow money in the past few months.
I mean, to me, well, then how did we lose money? How did we lose money?
So we lost money by not getting the exact timing right. If everything had come together and everything had been defined, and we went to borrow money at the bottom of that graph, we would have, to quote Dr. Goetz, won the lottery.
We would have.
We would have, but that, they can't go any lower, so that would have been ideal. Jamie's job is to monitor the market, and on these loans, if there's if there's an interest rate drop, that's what they do. They put us in the best possible advantage when those rates drop, or if they should drop again.
But we have to give them the information to do that, correct?
What's that?
We have to give them the information to do that.
So to get the ball rolling, we have to define the project. Absolutely.
All right.
It's never a good thing to lose money, but I will say this. At least we've lost money, but our 2 elementary schools are back on the radar where they should be with projects upcoming. They weren't even a consideration 6 months ago.
Yeah, we know the needs, and I think we'll get there. We'll get there. We have some big decisions to make, and in order to stretch these dollars, not to circle back to the enrollment, but the fewer classrooms we have to build because we did grade realignment, that leaves more funds somewhere else. So, not to say that that's the end all be all. I'm planning on putting those options in front of you guys to make those calls.
One question, if I'm looking at page 5 on this packet, and I know you talked about the $10 million threshold and kind of benefits you stay under that. Obviously is there any reason why in step 2, why that one was 12 and the rest were is there any reason which?
It's just an example. All of these or any of these will get revised once you tell us how much money you'd like to borrow and what that draw schedule looks like, because that's what tells me how fast you need to borrow the money. Gotcha. I just assumed in that option that there might be 1 year where you couldn't stay under the $10 million. Maybe you don't go over $10 million. It'll depend on the projects and the timing of those projects.
We could really just do the 9.9 on year 2 and then bump the 12 back to the last.
It's just an example. We'll customize that based on what you decide to do.
Well, I certainly look forward to to all the great conversations we're going to have about how to spend our dollars. And with that in mind, Jamie, thank you very much for being here. I don't want to cut anybody off earlier, but are there any other questions for Jamie?
Just one final comment, if I could. In all of these examples, we'll be back every year to have this same conversation and to customize each piece of the borrowing. You don't need to decide on day one, exactly what each of these looks like or exactly to the last dollar how much you'd like to spend on projects. Hopefully we get to the last borrowing and your interest earnings did well, your contingency did well, and we end up downsizing in a perfect world. So
I think it's worth pointing out that
lots of discussions.
We're not at the beginning of this project, right? The beginning was last year when we did our first borrowing for the middle school project. So we're already sort of a year in to this project schedule. We just don't know what the rest of the project schedule is going to look like. So the big building project for, Shippensburg Area School District has already begun. Okay, thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
All right, well, with that in mind, bring you to the last item in Mr. August's agenda, which I'm going to steal from him a little bit. I put this little proposal together, so I apologize, but you're going to get Professor Goetz here for a little bit. And I'm going to see if my clicker is going to work. Oh, it does. Excellent. Okay. So this is going to be a bit of a change for those of you who are used to our Monday night board meeting routine. But we are proposing a change to our Monday night board routine. And when I say we, I'm referring to board leadership. and proposing this to the rest of the board, but also to the public. And when I say change, this is not to suggest that we are doing anything wrong. Rather, we are doing things right, and there are other right ways to do things. And we believe that making some changes will help us be a little bit more effective in what we're trying to accomplish on Monday nights, hopefully. And so it is another right way to sort of proceed. So with this in mind, I want to share with you a few goals, right? So for our Monday night board meetings, we first of all want an open process. That means that the public needs to be aware of what's going on. The public needs to see us engage in productive conversation and debate, which brings us to part of the process here, is that sometimes in the midst of a normal board meeting, it gets tricky to kind of have the sort of discussion and free flowing of ideas that I think that we need to have in order for administration to bring forward recommendations that actually sort of meet the interests of all of the board members. We're also interested in efficiency. We want our board meetings to run efficiently. We're respective of people's times. Both board members, the hope is, and this sounds a little bit ironic because I'm using time in what is going to be a very long board meeting to talk about how we can make board meetings faster, but stick with me. We're hoping that our board meetings can be more efficient, can be more streamlined, can be sort of more predictable in a sense, and that we believe that this will be courteous both to our time as directors, district staff who also come, but also citizens. And one of the present problems that we have, right now I'm looking at the sign-in sheet, and for those who want to comment on non-agenda items, this meeting started at 7 o'clock. We may not get to that point until 9:30 tonight, so that's maybe 2.5 hours until we get to that second discussion or second citizens comment period for non-agenda items, and I think maybe we can make some improvements there. So those are the goals. Here's what our regular board meeting looks like every second and, almost every second and fourth Monday of each month. We start at 7 p.m., and you could see that I tried to emphasize through the gradient of the color how you just never know when the board meeting's going to end. It just kind of goes on and on. And then, of course, during budget season, which we are now entering, sometimes this is preceded by an hour-long budget and finance meeting, which operates as a committee of the whole, beginning at 6 o'clock, and so we're here for quite some time. So here's the present schedule there on the left, and what we're proposing is a slightly different structure of how our Monday nights might look. So the first thing that you're going to see is that our regular board meetings would start at 8. But that is not when the business of the board would begin. The business of the board would begin normally at 7, or in some cases earlier, just as sometimes we have to begin earlier when we have budget and finance meetings. So the regular bi-monthly routine would be a change to a 7 o'clock meeting, which we would call a committee of the whole. So the board has various committees that operate and do sort of important kind of vetting work for the board and bring forward proposals. However, sometimes the work that those committees do is of particular interest to the entire board. We're foreshadowing a lengthy discussion about facility needs and which kind of projects we're going to take on next. That is clearly something that everybody wants to be involved with, and it doesn't really make sense for a small committee of 3 to sort of take on that alone. So this committee of the whole meeting is designed to take on those kinds of conversations that might be big, kind of facilities projects, conversations that might be budget and finance, but also we would use this time for presentations that we often see during the superintendent's report. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. So let's talk about why this proposed change. So a few bullet points here. So first, we are hoping that this will create a more efficient, more streamlined regular board meeting. I'm capitalizing that on purpose. It's the regular board meeting. So among other benefits, as I mentioned, it would be a courtesy to folks who wanted to speak during that second comment period of the meetings, because hopefully that regular board meeting would be a much quicker, much more predictable. I use the term regimented because I couldn't think of a better word, but just kind of, bam, 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 we're sort of taking care of official business through that meeting. So how would that work? Well, in our regular board meetings, a big part of what takes a lot of time, and rightfully so, these are good things to do, are the reports and presentations. We just had two very useful, very important reports, but if we took these out of our regular board meeting and moved them to the committee of the whole, that would, so this serves a couple of functions. This gives us an opportunity to kind of discuss these things as a committee, and without sort of any formal any formal proposal on the table that's being debated for vote, but it gives us an opportunity to debate and talk and give feedback to administration so that they are better prepared when they come forward with an official recommendation. But we have other kinds of reports. Last meeting we had a curriculum report. That would be the kind of thing that would go into the committee of the whole. Programming reports. We've had recently quite a conversation about whether we should do some mental health screening, and there were a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about that. This would be the kind of thing that would be presented during the committee of the whole, and feedback could be acquired from all of the board members' concerns, so that administration can hopefully incorporate that feedback into a formal proposal that would come to the board later on. We saw the audit report in our last meeting. That would be a thing that would go to the committee of the whole. Building updates, we often have those, and that would also go to the committee of the whole, and facility needs like we see. And these are just some examples that I came across, or I came off the top of my head, but we in the past have gotten sort of reports from building principals as they come and talk about a thing that's happening in their building, which is awesome. All of us want to hear those, and there would be an opportunity in this committee of the whole meeting for those kinds of presentations. All right, so this committee of the whole is a format for presentations on any number of items in a slightly less formal setting, as I've kind of already discussed. So it would be more like a committee meeting. We wouldn't be taking formal votes probably in the committee of the whole, but giving feedback, as I said, sort of less formal feedback to administration so that they can revise proposals before they come to us formally. A discussion and vetting of high consequence items, as I mentioned, the building projects or any changes to programs or curriculum, budgetary matters, so all of these items before they come onto the regular agenda. Because of course, our regular approach is that things show up on the discussion agenda in meeting 1, and then in meeting 2, those things move to the action item or action items. But sometimes those discussion agenda items really require some legit discussion and some conversation. Mm-hmm. And if there is anything to be revised there, then that kind of restarts that process. So the goal here is that for sort of those high ticket, kind of high consequence items, administration would be able to present those to us previous to them coming on the discussion agenda in this committee of the whole, and hopefully formulate these in a way that address concerns of various directors. And then finally, the committee of the whole is a less formal opportunity for directors and admin to communicate and discuss priorities, general goals, and concerns, which we don't really have the opportunity for in our regular board meetings, except kind of at the end during board comments. But then it's kind of just this sort of standalone kind of comment that kind of hangs out in the ether there and doesn't really become part of the conversation unless it's pursued more fully. So, besides all these reports and presentations, this discussion and vetting of high consequence items before they appear on the discussion agenda, this bit will move to the committee of the whole. So the goal here is that when items, especially those high consequence things, when they come on to the regular board meeting agenda, we sort of already know what's going on there. We may have concerns, we may have disagreements, we're still going to have votes and whatever, and arguments for and against, and stuff, but at least we should all have a good understanding of what that all is before we see it on the discussion agenda. at least for high-ticket items. This is not to suggest that every single thing that you're going to see on the discussion agenda would be previously discussed in the committee of the whole, but rather those kind of big-ticket sort of items. So here's our present approach, or present, sort of regular schedule. This is the proposed. But of course, in the present, like I said, sometimes we have meetings prior to the regular board meeting, a budget and finance meeting. So this is just an example. This is not necessarily what it would look like, right? But you might see that when we have a budget and finance meeting, maybe we start that. So I was using the laser pointer. That would be unnecessary. We might start that meeting at, say, 6:15 or 6:30 and have an hour-long budget and finance meeting, and then a half an hour committee of the whole meeting, a bit shortened given the fact that we've already met in budget and finance, and then go on to our regular board meeting. That is just an example. This might look very different. We might not have a specific budget and finance meeting. Maybe it's a facilities meeting. I don't know. This would be up to administration to decide, sort of week to week, what needs discussion, what needs to come before the board. All right, so there's, again, the list of why. These are the bullet points that you saw. I'm not running you through a whole bunch more stuff. At this point, I wanted to give board members the opportunity to ask questions or if they have concerns to voice them and address them. I should say is there is nothing that I'm aware of in our policy that indicates when and how our regular board meetings work. So based on my understanding, with one little caveat, policy 006 does talk about board meetings, and there is something in there that says that the board meeting that occurs on the fourth Monday should be at 7 o'clock. However, before this all came about, there was a policy update suggested by PSPA that has new language for policy 006 that actually removes any specific reference to a time. And that just was sort of coincidental. That had nothing to do with this. But that particular agenda, that particular update to that particular policy is actually on our action agenda this evening. So were that approved, and I'm not sure there's anything of controversy in that policy, then that sort of frees the way for us to move forward with this. But I do not want to force this upon anyone. I want us to be in agreement and have sort of consensus that we're willing to give this a shot and move forward with it. So if there are concerns, I hope that we can address them, and then we can sort of have a quick vote just to sort of solidify the fact that we're going to move forward with this, hopefully beginning in February.
I have two questions.
Yes.
The public will be invited to the committee of the whole.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Thank you for mentioning that. They will be in this same format. They will be open to the public. They will be live streamed on YouTube just in the same way. So it's all very open, very public.
I knew that would be a question.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
And then second of all, Mr. August, what is your opinion on it? Because I feel like, you need to have input in it.
So Dr. Goetz and Ms. Eberly and I talked about this format and through my observations with the board. My goal is with that committee of the whole to, we kind of lived it already, where I'm bringing those high ticket, in-depth presentations along with my recommendations for us to have those conversations and for me to answer your questions. Okay, so it will ebb and flow in turn, depending on the year. This is the time of year when we're going to have budget, and I think we're going to have facility questions from now until until we get this settled. That gives us a forum to have that discussion, and for me to get that feedback. That's not in the second half of an 8 o'clock meeting. And then the 8 o'clock meeting just becomes about conducting the business of the board. So we kind of lived it tonight, where you heard two presentations, you had an opportunity, that format works well for me, and I think will work well for the board.
All right, so
I just wanted to make one comment. I've said it several times before that I don't feel like we have enough time to talk about issues at board meetings because there's so much business. So I am looking forward to it. I think it's a great idea.
All right, so this is a matter of semantics because we kind of already do this. And we've had a number of presentations tonight, and we acted as a committee of the whole because we haven't voted on anything yet, but it's 8:40 PM. Are you telling me that you're going to restrict the committee of the whole till 8 o'clock, and it's not going to bleed into 8 o'clock?
My goal is this, so depending on the board questions, let me back up. The goal is that committee of the whole ends at 8 o'clock so the regular board meeting can start on time. And if we need to continue at the next board meeting, we will. I've never had an instance that I can recall previously where we didn't start at 8 o'clock. Sometimes there's a little bit of lag time in between. My job is to try to fill that gap for an hour. There may be 10 minutes where, the committee of the whole ends and then the formal board meeting starts at 8. My goal is, as Dr. Goetz had previously said, is to make that 8 o'clock meeting run as efficiently as possible.
Because
I can also answer that question. Part of why I really like this is it sets a deadline for the end of that conversation, and then we move on.
Well, I guess that's the point. I mean, if we're going to start the board meeting at 8 and we're going to start the voting process at 8, then it makes sense. But if we're just going to let the committee of the whole bleed into after 8 o'clock, well,
That is
that's
not
what we did tonight.
That is not
We're sitting here.
that is not my intention. I definitely want us to have this, and then we're going to say, like, this is enough. We can't do any more, like, and we're going to have to push off any business to the next meeting.
And it may come down to the superintendent because, I'm confident Bill grew up in that system at Big Spring, and you know how that's organized. We've had superintendents here who have had these meetings, school board meetings, I've been on them, over by 8 o'clock in its entirety. But then we've also had superintendents like the one we just had and stuff that just lets things linger on, and we're sitting here at 10 o'clock at night.
This is all about efficiency, Mr. Boudreaux. I value your time. We have business to conduct, and it's my job to inform you. That's what I'm going to use committee of the whole for. At 8 o'clock, the board meeting starts, and we run through the business. Not that there won't be questions that come up on that agenda, but if we use this the way I intend, most of those questions will have been answered ahead of time.
Who provides the information to the committee of the whole?
Okay, so administration would select the topics that go in there. Just like tonight, and they both told me they were going to take about 15 minutes. I select the presentations that would go on there. Sometimes that will be me. So that might be other admin presenting to the board, soliciting, what does the board want to hear? So it will be a collaborative process of what should we have in committee of the whole, what's on the board's mind, and that's fully my intention to work with Dr. Goetz and Mrs. Eberly to set those agendas. There's usually two, depending on a regular committee of the whole night, there's 2 presentations. And each one takes 20 to 25 minutes, and then questions, and then we get to the board meeting. So to answer your question, with collaborating with the board leadership, would set those a committee agenda or a committee of the whole.
Where do we, as a board, have any say in this agenda?
So you would just tell me, hey, Mr. August, I want to hear, can you give me an update on such and such program? Or, certainly I would take feedback from any board member if there's an item that you feel like we should be, you want as a board to hear. We would put that in the committee of the whole, and I would do a presentation or get somebody in here to present for you. So it's not meant to be an insular process, and certainly board leadership would solicit things that the board wants to hear about.
Yeah, Mr. Scott, just to your point, in my mind, this opens it up for more discussion and more input from every director here, all 9 of us.
It sounds to me like you're adding another level of discussion that's less formal, so that we have committee of the whole, then the discussion agenda, and then the action agenda.
For some items, yeah, for sort of big items, like I said, right? So that when they come on the discussion agenda, like, we sort of already know what's there, like, and it's something that, administration believes that, is like, what is the will of the board, right? So stuff isn't being sort of invented out of whole cloth or whatever. I don't, it's probably the wrong expression. But certainly there will be some items that would just come immediately to the discussion agenda because there isn't enough time to sort of go through this process.
It would also mean that, that if a community member knows that they have something they want to say that's not on the agenda, they don't have to be here at 7 o'clock. They could come at 8 o'clock knowing that they won't have to wait 2.5 hours to say their.
Right, which is indeed one of my hopes, right? So if we can get our regular board meetings to within an hour, which is really, really my desire, right? Then somebody comes at an 8 o'clock meeting expecting to speak on a non-agenda item, and they've spoken before 9 o'clock. That is my hope. Who knows how it's going to work out, but that is my hope that we can streamline and be a bit more efficient with our regular board meetings.
And again, I think the process makes a lot of sense if the committee of the whole ends at 8 o'clock. But if the committee of the whole is going to end at 8:45, then we really didn't do anything except call the beginning of the agenda committee of the whole. Yeah, which it already really is.
Mr. August is hedging on it, but I told him before, like, I really like that 8 o'clock deadline because it means we have to end that meeting.
I will commit now that we start meetings at 8 o'clock.
The information, you say 8 o'clock, but if they're giving a presentation, I'm a board member, I want information, I stop asking questions?
No, it bleeds into the next meeting if the issue has to. But you got to get some kind of control because we're at 8:46 p.m. and we haven't even started voting yet.
So it just becomes part of we have to get used to that.
Right.
I mean, we know we have to shut up at 8 o'clock.
Well, and I think Bill's going to be the one to guide all that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my goal is to start at 8 o'clock, let the public have their chance to speak in a timely manner so that they're not here, unless they wish to be here for the committee of the whole.
Dr. Coates, one more question. What happens to regular committee assignments?
Wait, what?
So regular committee assignments, regular committees, that's sort of a separate issue, but they will continue. We're still going to have regular committees, and they will have a regular schedule and, sort of operate not dissimilarly to how they have in the past.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or concerns? Okay, then, so reading up on parliamentary procedure, I don't believe that we need a roll call vote for these kinds of things. So what we're going to use is a process called unanimous consent, by which I say I move to make this change, and are there any objections? And so if you have an objection, say so or indicate by raising your hand.
This is no time limit. I mean, if this doesn't work out the way we want, we can change it back.
Of course, yeah. We're not locking anything in. All righty, then, hearing no objections, we will plan for this schedule in our next board meeting, which will be the second Tuesday of February, when the committee of the whole, I believe that we have a budget and finance meeting sort of pending for that. So what the actual pre-8 o'clock schedule will look like is TBD and TBA, but that will be announced with the regular agenda. But you can expect the regular board meeting to begin at 8 o'clock. All right, let me get back to my agenda notes here as we move forward. Is that it for the superintendent report?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. All right, so item 4A is approval of minutes. We have item 4B, which is finance. There are various attachments to the agenda that have to do with the finance reports. I'm not going to read through them all. But there are bills of payment, financial reports, tax report. Item 4C, updates to Act 93 job descriptions. Administration recommends board approval of 2 job descriptions in the Act 93 compensation plan and the renaming of the position of supervisor of special education to director of student services and the position of assistant supervisor of special education to assistant director of student services. The changes in titles are more reflective of their current job responsibilities. attached to the two job descriptions. Item 4D are the local audit reports that the board saw last meeting 2 weeks ago. Item 4E, agreement between Franklin Marshall College and Shippensburg Area School District. This is a renewal, I believe, of an agreement that we have with Franklin and Marshall College to host a Pennsylvania College Advising Corps advisor at Shippensburg Area High School. So we do have a person in this position, and we are voting to renew that relationship. Both entities will provide $30,000 towards the program for the 23-24 and 24-25 school years. Program targets low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented students and will assist all students as they prepare for college and/or a career. This marks the 7th year the district has contracted with the F&M College for this position. 4F, Work Partners Life Solution Services Renewal Agreement. Administration recommends the approval of the attached one-year renewal agreement with Work Partners Life Solution, an employee assistance program at a cost of $1.35 per employee per month, with a yearly cost of over $6,500 for a population of 418 employees. This does represent an increase from the past agreement. Item 4D, contract with DJ Genery. Did I say that right this time? Or is it Genergy? Sorry, DJ Genergy. I didn't say it right. The administration recommends the approval of the attached contract with DJ Genergy and the Shippensburg Area Middle School for a winter dance to be held on Friday, March 31st, 2023. Item 4H, updated 22-23 school district volunteer handbook. Item 4I, K-12 school guidance plan, which was presented to us in our last meeting 2 weeks ago. Let's go to that point. Is there a motion to approve items 4A through item 4I?
Motion approved.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger.
Second.
Second by Mr. Buderbaugh. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buderbaugh.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 4J is personnel, and there are a number of personnel, a number of changes, FMLA qualifying leave, salary adjustments, hirings, and resignation acceptances, and I'm not going to read through all of them. Do we have a motion to approve item 4J?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Buderbaugh,
Second.
second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buderbaugh.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, now we're to the action agenda. Each of these items we saw, I believe each of these items we saw last week on the discussion agenda and discussed some of them. The first is has to do with the Franklin County Career and Technical Center appointments. Administration and I should say board leadership as well recommends the approval of the appointment of Mrs. Becky Wolfinger and Mr. Charlie Suiters and Mr. Jim Bard as an alternate to represent the district on the Franklin County Career and Technical Center Joint Operating Committee. The term on the committee is for 3 years. Do I have a motion to approve these appointments?
Motion to approve 5A.
Moved by Mr. Buderbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion? I just want to thank them for volunteering to take this position on. It's a very important duty, and I think that you'll learn a lot. I've been there a couple of times, and it's great. It's a great opportunity. Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buderbaugh.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Steph Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5B is our 23-24 district calendar. A draft of the academic calendar is attached for review and discussion. Calendar has 180 student days, including Act 80 days, and 186 teacher pay days per the collective bargaining agreement. Is there a motion to approve item 5B?
Motion to approve. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Eberly, seconded by Mrs. Wolfinger. Any discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5C, Next Gen Automation Incorporated proposal. Administration recommends the approval of the attached proposal with Next Gen Automation to replace Siemens Building Automated Controls with Next Gen Building Automated Controls in the Shippensburg Area Middle School. Work will be started when the students are out of school for summer break. The cost of the project is $790,000 and will come out of the designated fund balance for future debt repay capital projects. Is there a motion to approve item 5C?
Fred's going to make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott,
Second?
second by Mr. Buterbaugh. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Mark Buterball,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5D, approval for additional ESL position. Administration recommends approval to hire a full-time ESL teaching position for the district. This year, the position would be split between Shippensburg Area Intermediate School and Nancy Grayson Elementary to serve our growing English learner population. Do I have a motion to approve item 5D?
Fred's going to make a motion.
Mr. Scott
Second.
makes the motion. Dr. Lyman, second. Is there a discussion?
How are we funding it?
We had funds, so we had attempted to contract with the IU to get additional services. We had money set aside for that. We were not able to get those services, so we're looking to hire our own teachers, so those funds will offset it. And it needs to go into the budget, given our steady or steep increase in population.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters, Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5E is the Franklin County Special Education Consortium, the SOAR program. So this is pending final review of the district solicitor, but administration recommends the approval of the attached MOU and agreement for the SOAR program. This therapeutic program is a collaboration between our Franklin County Consortium members to provide a therapeutic placement for students in an alternative setting. Maximum cost of the district for the 22-23 school year is $42,785 with 4 total slots. This is likely an overestimate as administration anticipates a delayed start, February 1, 23, and a possible decrease in per student or per pupil costs. Is there a motion to approve item 5E?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger,
Second.
second by Ms. Eberly. Mrs. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5F is the resolution not to raise taxes above the index versus proposing a preliminary budget where we would be able to raise above the index. So each year the Board of Directors is required to approve one of the two options for developing an annual budget, and administration recommends that we adopt a budget resolution not to exceed the Act 1 index, in which the millage rate for real estate taxes cannot exceed the established Act 1 index rate for Shippensburg Area School District. This, of course, doesn't lock us into any tax increase or any specific tax increase. It just says that we will not go above the index.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Buterbaugh, second by Mr. Suiters. Is there discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler. Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, item 5G is the Youth Truth Survey. Mr. August, do you want to take us a moment to remind us and the community what the Youth Truth Survey is?
Yes, sir. So the Youth Truth Survey is a national survey that we would use at every building. It asks for feedback from students, staff, and community members in a variety of different areas, some of which include engagement, belonging, academic rigor, and a number of other school-related priorities. This survey is going to allow us to have baseline data about where we are in terms of feedback from our stakeholders, allow us to do some strategic planning around areas where we need to improve. It's also going to give us comparative data to schools that look just like us. So it will be a school that looks very, all the schools that take this nationally, we would be able to judge where we are in comparison to them. And it will allow us to, if we continue on with it, see any longitudinal improvements that we might have in focus areas. To my mind, it's a critical piece of our strategic planning for our district improvement.
Total cost per year is $13,600 for student, family, and staff surveys on a year-long subscription. Cost will be taken from the unassigned fund balance for the 22-23 year and from the technology budget for the remaining 2 years. Is there a motion to approve item 5G?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Any discussion?
How's it administered?
So it is computer-based. It takes 15 to 20 minutes for students to take. For parents and staff, there's a link that is pushed out, and they can take it. Typically, staff would do it at a faculty meeting, and then we'd have a window that we would communicate out to the community to say, please take it here, with reminders from the building level. And there would be an opt-out for whatever reason, if parents would not want their student to take it.
Like a Survey Monkey kind of a thing.
It's a little more sophisticated, but very, very much the back end of it is pretty rigorous in terms of the data we get. It's pretty helpful.
All right, roll call.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Item 5H is Fulcrum Management Solutions Agreement for Thought Exchange. Administration recommends approval to enter into agreement with Fulcrum Management Solutions for the use of Thought Exchange. Thought Exchange is a crowdsourced survey tool that will be used for strategic planning and the creation of a district profile of a graduate. Mr. August, is this part of the same package?
Similar but different, where Youth Truth measures culture and environment and basically student and community experiences. This is a survey tool that allows us to get the priorities back from our community about what they value, and that will help us shape the profile of a grad, which will in turn drive curriculum and instruction in all our buildings and our strategic plan.
Just as an aside, for some future committee of the whole meeting, I'm sure that we would all like a kind of explanation of your vision of the profile of a grad.
Absolutely, Dr. Goetz. I very much plan on doing that. I recently just did a video for the community that kind of explained where we were headed. So, certainly an upcoming committee of the whole meeting that will be on the agenda.
The total cost of this software or service is $20,160 for a year-long subscription, which will be taken from the unassigned fund balance for the 22-23 school year and from the technology budget moving forward. Is there a motion to approve item 5H?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lyman. Discussion?
Yeah, just one thing, just to be clear, this is really different than like a typical district mission statement. This is like us specifically defining just so everybody's clear, like the important experiences, knowledge, or skills that we really want our kids to leave our district with.
Absolutely, and we have a general sense of those things, but through this survey tool, the AI on it is pretty good, so it will put themes, and from those themes through the outreach committee, my plan is, to get those down to an accessible set of qualities with some indicators underneath that we're going to incorporate in everything. And I'd just like to point out that this is, it's not just one use. We can also use this in meetings. We have this, we use it in a variety of different ways. The major use, though, is, for this task.
Perfect, thank you.
And I'll just say, it's taken me a while to just sort of wrap my head around Mr. August's vision for the profile of the grad, but I'm coming around and I'm beginning to get it. And as I think the district begins to get it and teachers buy in to the vision, I think it can be pretty transformational in the way that we do education, rather than just kind of, continuing down the same wagon road. We're really trying to chart a specific path and being a little bit more intentional about what we're doing in the classroom. I'm pretty excited about it. All right, no further discussion. Is there, let's see, roll call.
Mr. Giambard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, item 5I, policies for approval. So these are policies 006 and policy 903. These represent revised language that was recommended by PSBA. These have gone through the policy committee and first read on the discussion agenda last time and are now for second read and approval. Is there a motion to approve item 5I?
I have a discussion. Can I ask a question now?
Let's wait till after the motion is made.
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mrs. Eberly. Mr. Scott, you have a...
It's hard to print out. You send us these attachments. I have a problem printing them out, getting it even open at my home on the computers.
We can certainly talk after the meeting about how best to get it to you, Mr. Scott.
Okay, and I think this is the one, there's extensive changes in here about crossing out and adding two different things about the public meeting. I think I'm looking at the right thing. Why was it so extensive changes?
So most of these come to us from Pennsylvania School Board Association. Their lawyers vet what's going on in court cases and what's going on throughout the Commonwealth, and they make recommendations to our policies. So we subscribe to them, and generally speaking, we look at those updates because they're vetted through the solicitors.
Oh, okay.
And then we make whatever tweaks that we feel is necessary.
So the changes we should have been making years ago, we finally got to final product.
Yeah, they come in waves. The policies are updated. Every few months we'll get an update saying you should consider changing these policies.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just say, Mr. Scott, I mean, when we were reviewing this in the policy committee, it looked like there were massive changes to language, but when I analyzed like what was removed and what was sort of in, I didn't get the sense that there were really substantial changes. It was really more a cleaning of the language rather than any substantive change to how we do anything.
Well, that's understandable then. Okay.
All right, roll call.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Giambard.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, 5 more, kids. We're almost there. Item 5J is agreement with New Story in New Cumberland for special education services. New Story School operates a private licensed school in New Cumberland, Pennsylvania. New Story provides educational services to children with special education requirements. The proposed agreements are for one student for the 22-23 school year. The cost per day is $300 at a moderate level of intensity. The program provided by New Story is based on a four-rate pricing model. Is there a motion to approve item 5J?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Buterbach, second by Mrs. Eberly. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, item 5K is agreement with New Story and Carlisle for special education services. Just going to skip down to that second paragraph. It says at the beginning of the 22-23 school year, an agreement was board approved for this student. This student has been thriving in the classroom and no longer requires a one-to-one aid. The autistic support rate at the beginning of the year was $535 per day. His new autistic support rate is $405 per day. Is there a motion to approve item 5K?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger,
Second.
second by Dr. Lyman. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, item 5L, middle school construction project change orders. The project at the middle school will require expedited decision-making regarding change order work to provide the best opportunity to complete work in a timely manner. In order to facilitate approval of changes to the construction, limited authority should be provided by the board to allow for select administrators to provide approval for change orders. Formal ratification of a change order approval by the board will occur following any approval by the administration. So it still will be approved, but just afterwards. An accounting of all approved, pending, and potential change orders will be provided to the district via a monthly report from the construction manager. This is a similar approach that's used in many other Pennsylvania school districts, and I believe these change orders have it says it in the next paragraph. So administration recommends that authority be given to the superintendent, business administrator, and facilities director to co-authorize changes up to $20,000 per each change item, limited to non-discretionary charges. Ratification of the authorization of change order approval by the Board of School Directors will occur for each authorized change. The Board of Directors reserves the right to provide further limits or modifications to the authority provided during the course of the project. So we can change this later on if we need to. The authority is provided by this action only for the middle school classroom and cafeteria additions project general construction contract. Is there a motion to approve item 5L?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Lyman,
Second.
second by Ms. Wolfinger. Any discussion?
Yeah, so what happens if the administration approves a change order and then the board doesn't approve it? Or do you have to pay us back?
I'll make sure that doesn't happen, Mr. Buterball. This is only on contingency plans for high ticket things that we don't have a choice on, so it's non-discretionary. These are things that would stop the project in its tracks, but are underneath a certain threshold. And just a reminder, the board, we have a tight window to get the middle school project completed. So it would take really 3 turning of the keys to get one of these change orders approved. All 3 of myself, Christy, and Chad would have to agree that we don't have any other choice. It's not my intention that we're going to use this frequently, but if we run across something that is relatively minor in the scope of the work that would stop construction or otherwise put us behind, we would maybe need to exercise this depending on the timing of the next board meeting.
If you did that, would you communicate out to the board?
Absolutely. It wouldn't be done in isolation. It wouldn't be, no surprises is our motto, so.
No further discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
No.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Buterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried, 8 yes, 1 no.
Item 5M, Sasha's Softball Booster Club bylaws have been updated. And those, is there a motion to approve item 5M?
Motion approved.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger,
Second.
Second by Mrs. Eberly. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
And the final item in our action agenda, item 5N, district participation in Shippensburg Community Partnership. The Community and Outreach Committee, along with administration, recommends the district's formal participation in the Shippensburg Community Information Partnership Organization. The SCIP will be comprised of the Borough of Shippensburg, Shippensburg Township, Southampton Township, Franklin County, Southampton Township, Cumberland County, Shippensburg University, and the Shippensburg Area School District. This is, in some regards, a symbolic gesture, but I think critical that we participate in this partnership with these area with our area partners, with our local partners. Sorry, I should have made that comment later. Is there a motion to approve item 5N?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Wolfinger, second by Dr. Lyman. Any discussion?
I wondered why, like, all of the townships in the district weren't included in this thing, but I don't know very much about this thing. I'm the new guy.
Which one isn't?
They are.
Like Hopewell and Newburgh Borough and
Orrstown.
I gotcha.
yeah, there's just
I don't think they
Al,
want
do you want to come up and fill them in on it?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question, but that's certainly, Becky and I have a meeting this Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock over at the Southampton Township Building, and we'll ask that and find out. Again, the major purpose as we design a website is to make sure that we're not scheduling events on top of one another, we're not competing with one another, and we're looking for opportunities where we can support and assist one another to make the events that we have successful, mostly focused in on parks and recreational activities.
I mean, it sounds beautiful. I just wondered why all of the district wasn't included.
Well, and what's they weren't ready to join right now. So later on they would join it. They see how it went, but they weren't ready right now.
And that would be my hope, is that, outreach has been all about bringing the community together, and this is just one more way, hopefully, that we can bring more partners to the table with that experience. So never say never.
As long as they know they're invited.
Yes.
All right, any other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Dr. Michael Lyman.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, there are several items on the discussion agenda. So we'll sort of go through these, but don't be afraid to ask questions if you have them about any of these issues. As a reminder that we're not voting on any of these issues today, but should be next on our next meeting. So item 6A is memorandum of understanding for school resource officer. Administration recommends the approval of the attached memorandum of understanding with the Borough of Shippensburg for a school resource officer pending both district and borough solicitors review.
So I do have a question regarding that. There's no attachment on this.
That was my question, too.
Yeah, it's there.
Go ahead, Dr. Moore. Thank you.
Mr. August, okay if I fill everybody in on that real quickly? If it were up to me, we would have boots on the ground already, as you well know. The legal counsel for the borough did take a little more time than what we, with our aggressive timeline, so we're back, probably back until the next board meeting, hopefully to have this on as an action item. The MOU now is complete. It has been through the legal counsel, from our legal counsel as well as the boroughs. I have read it thoroughly. I need Mr. August to make sure and give it his blessing as well, and then it will go to you as the board. The other thing that we're looking at, this MOU will run from whenever we implement this, hopefully maybe February 14th after our next board meeting. through June 30th of 2025. The financial breakdown that I'm going to need some help from Christy and Sherry on, we're looking at breaking it down into spring semester 23-24 school year and the 24-25 school year, and also some discussion as the set-aside funds that the board has already set aside, and possibly with the grant money. And as Sherry and I have discussed, sometimes it becomes a little bit of a shell game and so on, but we hope to have all that for you well before the February 13th board meeting, and hopefully possibly even getting boots on the ground here in the school district by February 14th, which I think is Valentine's Day. Does that answer your question, Steph?
So I appreciate the timeline, but I'm a little concerned that we might have to have this on the discussion agenda next meeting as well if we don't have the
Agreed.
The MRO.
It's actually on the website. You have to log in to be able to view it. It's locked. Because I reached out to Tammy today.
But we're still saying discussion again for the community.
Right. I'm just saying if you guys want to view it, though, you have to be logged in to actually view it.
All right. Item 6B, job description for Assistant Superintendent of Schools. So it has been this board's position that we need to create an Assistant Superintendent position. And that job description has been completed, and a draft of that job description is now available for your review. Are there any comments or questions about that job description at this point?
Job description, no. Do we know what a timeline is, what our goal is to hire?
So with as soon as it's approved, we'll advertise and start that process, Mr. Kressler. It's likely whatever candidate we get would be held 60 days. So I think optimistically we would be looking at somebody maybe, towards spring or the end of the school year.
All right, item 6C, a memorandum of understanding regarding long-term substitutes. So this has been an issue in the past. Administration recommends the approval of the attached memorandum of understanding requesting waiving the 30 consecutive day provision. Mr. August, do you want to just explain this real quick?
Absolutely. So it puts us at a competitive disadvantage for limited long-term subs. Currently the agreement says that a long-term subs for us does not get the regular wait until 30 days. If they were to miss one day for any reason, their clock resets, which is pretty difficult to track on the back end and not particularly fair to someone that's doing solid work for us. Additionally, during that window, we have to pay our own teachers to plan for the classes that these people are in, so there's costs there. This gets us to be a little more competitive in getting and securing long-term substitutes, and it allows someone who's already kind of done that 30-day probationary period, whatever you may call it, to move into another long-term sub position as well. So at the end of the day, it's about treating LTSs better, and the same as other districts are treating them, because we are in competition for a limited pool of folks.
Any questions? All right, item 6D, high school foreign exchange students for the 23-24 year. Per board policy, these need to be approved, and it sounds like we have exchange students from Germany, Italy, and Spain who've met the qualifications to attend Shippensburg, which is exciting.
Dr. Goetz, I just have one thing. I asked this a couple months ago. We got the flags from the students who were here last year. Just curious if we have any update as to what we're doing with them.
I was wondering the same thing.
I'll get back to you, Mr. Kressler, on the flags.
Perfect.
I was just thinking, I wonder, do we already have flags for those countries? Because if not, then that's going to make our hallway look more colorful. Item 6E, the 23-24 senior high school program of studies. Approve this each year. The high school administration and teachers have reviewed and revised the high school program of studies. Are there any questions or concerns about the draft? All right, item 6F, revised Shippensburg Area School District ARP ESSER Health and Safety Plan. As Mr. August mentioned before, sometimes as soon as we say health and safety plan, then people get excited, but this is not really that much going on here with this one, right?
No, sir. It's just, Sherry, you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, so the only thing with this, we have to review it and revise it every 6 months as part of us receiving the ARP money. So in this revision period, what happened was in the original health and safety plan that was approved in August, it did have Terrace Metrics in it and Carasolis, so that was crossed out due to the tabling and it dying on the table at the last board meeting. And then also the CDC has revamped some of their guidelines, backing down some recommendations. So it used to be that if you were in close contact or testing positive for COVID, that you stayed quarantined for 5 days if you tested positive, or you stayed home for 5 days testing positive, and then you wore a mask for 10 days coming back. Now that mask has been recommended to 5 days. So you stay home for 5 days, you come back, and the recommendation from the CDC is 5 days, but that's what the wording that we use is recommendation, not mandate.
All right, hearing no questions, item 6G. This is the first read policy, a policy change, policy number 701.1, facilities renaming. Mrs. Eberly, did you want to talk briefly about this?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak on that briefly. So as you might remember, back on January 9th at the last board meeting, this policy was up for the first read, the facilities naming. It's back on here on the discussion because the language that obligates us to the 5-year statute of disassociated time prior to naming a facility in honor of someone was removed. So that verbiage was initially put on there because it was borrowed from other districts. We did check with the solicitor that it's not required, so we can remove it, but because there was that substantive verbiage change that we brought it back for that first read.
Any questions on that? All right, thank you, Mrs. Eberly. Item 6H, Roof Connect proposal for roof inspections at district school buildings. A number of inspections are being proposed. Did you want to say something?
I did. In talking more closely with Chad, he initially recommended all 5 buildings. The roofs at Byrd and the intermediate unit have not been tested within 5 years. Roof testing is a standard practice. Roof inspections are a standard maintenance practice. Byrd is about to come out of warranty, so it's critical for those two. We haven't had the other buildings' roofs inspected prior to COVID. They're not necessarily due. So my thought is to just pull those other 3 off and just do the 2 that are going to be a priority. We will at some point need to get on a maintenance schedule where we are inspecting roofs, like 1 a year. But that's a big chunk right now. So just doing those 2 that are most critical.
So administration's recommending the first 2, the Byrd and Grayson, and not the
Byrd and the intermediate unit.
Oh, Byrd and school. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, what do they expect? What are they inspecting? I mean, it's a rubber roof, correct?
I believe so.
So what are they looking?
So the point of the inspection sometimes, depending on where it is, so I'm not necessarily. I got a roof education today, but it's limited. When it gets to the end of its life, they do some testing, core testing, to see, what the roof's capabilities are. They do, I think, some core samples. You don't want to do that on a roof that has a lot of time. And the inspection, I can't speak to everything that they do. I know that the results of that, according to Chad, allow us to, make some maintenance adjustments that can extend the length of it. It also gives us a time. The most important thing is it tells us when it would fail. So they'll inspect it and say it's still good for this amount of time, which gives the board a window on how and when to replace it. So it's twofold. One, what can we do to extend it? And then two, when will we absolutely have to replace it based on this?
I guess I don't understand how you could tell how long something's like that's gonna last. It's similar to a liner in a swimming pool. I can look at it, it could break tomorrow. You know, that's why I was asking what are they inspecting for. And I guess we would just do it with the track. The guy come in and said the track was you know, decent to use for 2 years. Now it's tearing up more than what it was before.
I can't speak to that. I just know that this is a typical services that schools employ to test their roofs.
Yeah.
Because roofs can, as you know, be expensive, and when they fail, it's usually catastrophic.
Also, even from the conversation with Chad, so let's just say that like the roof, one section of the roof might be replaced, and then the other part of the roof could still be like 12 years old. So it's like part of the roof, like you might think that it's 12 years old, but like I guess like one part of it, like if the expectancy is 25 years, that they're doing them in like portions.
So different, which complicates it. Different parts of roofs over time, I've learned, have been replaced or repaired or have had, some mitigation done to them to extend their lives. So you can have a roof, you're not able to say like the roof's going to last 20 more years, but you may be able to say this section of it can be replaced or improved, and that section will last for a number of years.
Well, I thought we just did the roof at the middle school.
We did, yeah, the middle and the high school, didn't we?
That needs inspected already?
During the middle school, so whenever they did the feasibility study, at that time, the middle school roof was 2 years old.
So again, those have to be on a schedule. We're pulling the middle school and the high school and Grayson off and just doing these two because they are, they're at or beyond that 5-year window.
It's allowing you to start a baseline.
Right.
We can start a procedure now. It's every 5 years. It's going to be
Right. Looking at the roofs on a regular basis.
Sounds like some of those questions maybe should be directed to Chad. All right, sorry. Next item is item 6I. So last year we approved the purchase of new high school band uniforms. However, there was, I think that like the default was that we were going to, discard the old band uniforms. And some folks are like, hey, we can do things with those old band uniforms. They can either be donated or used in some other way. And so this is a move to allow those uniforms to be donated, to be used to make all kinds of cool things, right? As a sort of fundraising project, not a sort of, a fundraising project for the band boosters. Is that correct?
That would be accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds great. Item 6J, materials testing contract with Hillis Harney's Engineering Associates. All right, so during a construction project, particularly additions of a new build, there's a need for the testing of materials being installed in the work. The costs of the work are part of the soft cost budget for the project. Pricing was solicited from 3 firms, one of which returned a proposal for the middle school project. Hillis Carney's, a firm that often provides these services for Pennsylvania public school projects, provided a proposal. Comparison for recommendation for award, the award would be not to exceed amount against which unit prices of tests would be billed. The district would only pay for the tests needed and may extend the amount if needed as the project progresses to completion or extend services to include site work at the middle school to be bid at a later date. So the recommendation is for the contracted materials testing for the middle school's project to this engineering company in an amount not to exceed $17,500 based on the proposal dated December 30th.
So basically, this is a third party checking the work for the same cost that we would have paid the contractor themselves on these materials like concrete and other stuff to make sure it's up to snuff, rather than having the contractor checking their own work. It's kind of a standard procedure as well.
Any questions on that? All right, item 6K, GISA Amendment Number 2, final decision on the redundant underground electrical feed. So back in October, the board approved Amendment 2 to the GISA agreement for work at the middle school in the amount of $2,188,000. Per the discussion that occurred regarding this agenda item, it was proposed that language be included in this amendment to allow for the district to remove the scope of work related to redundant underground electrical feed for the high school until January 31, 23, as the district is considering replacing the current generator at the high school. This approach provides a more effective use of district funds. The updated documents shared under the superintendent reports at the November 14th meeting provided the option to remove the scope of work for the redundant underground electrical feed for a reduction in costs of $134,000 and are attached for easy reference. So administration will recommend the approving of the scope of work for the redundant underground electrical feed because we have purchased the generator. Is that correct?
We have not purchased them, but I mean, that's an item for the board to consider.
Any questions on that? All right, item 5L, or is this I? K-I. Purchase of property. The district has an interest in the office building at 9318 Molly Pitcher Highway, which is currently owned by Dr. Dean Burkholder. This would be a motion to authorize administration and the solicitor to begin discussions with Dr. Burkholder with details to be brought back, discussions for purchase of the building with details to be brought back for the board at the February 13th meeting. So this is not we would not have an action item on the February 13th meeting with a specific purchase price, but like to begin, to empower administration and the solicitor to begin a conversation with Dr. Burkholder for the purchase of that property.
I have a comment, and I'm not going to make it long here because it's 20 till 10, but I do not plan to support this at all. We just heard that we have problems at our elementary schools and we need classrooms. We have a track that is crumbling. We have a high school basketball court that is constantly under repair now, and we have a stadium that we've been debating for 4 years, and this board has done nothing about it. And now you want to purchase a property for the administration when we haven't even done anything for our elementary students or our high school students or our student athletes. So I will be a negative vote on that.
If I could just chime in, and I will promise to not be too long either. I actually do fully support the idea of this because I think we all know that if you've been to our administration building, it's outdated, it's too small, and all of that. I think that I really want to see this come to fruition. And I also think of outside the physical building itself, like what better way to boost the morale of our staff, our wonderful staff that are there, than to give them something new. And I think that's a great idea, and I think it fits a lot of our needs. And I think, down the road, moving some people here and there and clearing up some more space, it's all a great idea, and I support the idea of it. But I'm going to have to back up Mark on that. I can't be supportive of this at the snap of a finger when I've been on this board for 13 months and we have done none of those things that have been on our discussion agenda every single meeting regarding athletic facilities. Our gym floor twice in the last week has had pieces of it like pop up. That's a major hazard. If that happens during an athletic contest, the game's over. That would be a terrible look for us. Our track has potholes in it still. I was just out there last week. It's still not in good shape. I wouldn't want my children to participate on that track. I fully support the administration getting this building, but I cannot fully support it until we are willing to match that and put some work and plans to go forward for our student body and the students themselves, because I'm here for the kids. As much as I greatly appreciate all of our administration and those people, every time I have a question, comment, concern, I contact them, I get information, I walk in there, I'm greeted with smiles every time. I want them to get that. But I also know that I'm here for the students. I had a great experience as a kid in this district. I want the other students now, the next generation, I want to be able to give back to them. So I support the idea of this, but for me to go forward with it, I think we got to give something to the kids as well.
For me, I support the idea, but I have a problem. For 3 years, I've heard nothing but the high school's landlocked, Nancy Grayson landlocked, administration landlocked. And we're going to pay over $500,000 for 1.2 acres of land. A building with that doesn't make sense to me. If we talk about 25 acres, 35, thinking of the future, I have no problem. But for 1.2 acres for a building, I can't support that.
So I'm just going to say this. I will tell you, when it first came about, I was very hesitant. You can ask Ms. Eberly. I was very hesitant about it. But I think it's important for us to keep in mind that we have to be a little bit open-minded to some of the things to solve some of the problems in the future. And I think what's really important is to understand why we're going to buy this building and how it's going to affect the schools. So we have a lot of administration that are currently occupying space in the high school. And in order to free up space for extra classrooms, you know, we don't have in-school suspension here at the high school, which we desperately need to kind of curb some of the behaviors that are going on in the high school. There's no space for anyone, for anything extra in the high school. We have to find a way to get some of the administrators out of this building to open up space for the kids. So when we're talking about it being for the kids, it is for the kids. It's just a different way of looking at solving a problem. We all know from the feasibility study that the administration building is in desperate need of upgrades. Go back to the feasibility study and look at how much money it was going to take to actually repair that building and tell me which is the cheaper route. $500,000 for a piece of land that's going to solve the problems, or I think it was $2 million to fix all the problems at the administration building. So, you know, you're solving a problem at the high school with space, and you're also doing it in a more cost-effective way. I understand y'all's frustration with the athletics, but if our priority is, you know, our children's education, we have to also address those behaviors so that our kids can get educated. Because right now with the behaviors, nobody can learn in an environment where they can't move. Nobody can learn in an environment when you have kids running out the hallway chasing the principal. Nobody can thrive in a situation where kids are not being, you know, reprimanded with in-school suspension.
Well, I think that that's the other part. No one on this board was going out to necessarily look to update the administration first. We didn't anticipate Dr. Burkholder selling that facility or offering it to us first. But I think ultimately, if we know that we have a issue with behaviors at the high school level and the middle school level, and we know that the consistency with discipline between the middle school and the high school, we don't even offer in-school suspension at the high school level because we don't have space. However, the purchase or potential purchase of this facility will free up the space that we can discipline children. Also knowing that special education, that they can't be suspended outside of school for more than 15 days. So you have to be creative with what we have. Yes, perception, it is not, it would appear to some that maybe that administration is getting a suite. However, but I think that number for the administration building to completely redo it was over $7 million. It was like $6 million or something.
I was lowballing. There was like 2 options.
Yes.
We're still going to use the administration building, correct? It's not going away.
Correct, but it would also alleviate some of the stress on the building by having all of those individuals there. So it would help, you know, whether if it's the HVAC or if it would help, like with the plumbing, that there wouldn't be that many people there. Is that some of those issues that do need corrected could be remedied or budgeted for in the future, but they're not necessarily.
Have we looked at any other options?
Well, this is the one that fell into our lap.
I understand that, but have we looked at any other options, land purchase or what available? Have we had talked to a real estate agency what's available?
This is the way that I think of it. We're involved in this great big renovation project district-wide. We're looking at all of our buildings and trying to meet all of our building and athletic needs for the next, how many ever years. We started with the middle school project. We've committed $14 million, and we're sort of chugging forward with that. And we're looking at other things. And I think every single person on this board and probably every administrator would put administration building at the very last of that list, as the very last priority. But then, like, an incredible deal just sort of fell.
How do you know that? How do you say,
appears-
how do you know it's an incredible deal?
Because Dr. Brookholder told us it is.
It was appraised as well. The property
When
was
you
appraised.
consider the cost of fulfilling those needs, right? You look at, you say, here's all of these people who need office space that should be away from the high school, it should all be together. Like, the cost of that, either in our current building or in some other building, is going to be substantially more than what we're looking at with this option.
But
So, like I said, I know this is like lowest priority, and I know the superintendent isn't gonna wanna like say, yeah, like, I need a new office. Like
Which
that,
is-
I mean, it's never going to like sort of campaign for that. But this seems like such a bargain basement deal to meet these needs, whereas the price tag to meet these needs in any other way would just be so much more. And the point that both Ms. Eberly and Ms. Wolfinger made, that like, this is going to benefit our schools, right? I mean, we have administrators, central office administrators who are not in the central office because there's no space in the central office. Having all of those people together is going to make them work better, and it's going to free up space for programmatic needs in the high school, which is critical.
Superintendent, how many of your people are you gonna have with you if you built that Burkholder building? How much?
So we will have, so the initial plan that we have, if it were to come to fruition, we would be able to get all district office personnel out at that property, with the exception of the special ed department. The plan would be to keep them at the current location, along with pulling maintenance back to that spot, which makes a little more sense because there's a lot of maintenance that goes on. You know, the back end of that building is essentially the maintenance department. And I just want to say, I was initially reluctant to even bring this forward myself. I put admin at the bottom of the list of things that we need to accomplish. You know, my desire is your desire to take care of the kids first. When we look at costs of $4 million to add on to another building, or another $4 million to renovate, and I think it was two something to build on somewhere. This is the cheapest possible option to check that piece of our facility piece off. And not, it's really about cost avoidance at some point, even if it is at the bottom of the list. We will have to do something about the district office. It is obviously a very old building, and old buildings cost more and more money, over time. So it is not something that I relish, but what kind of flipped it for me, Mr. Scott, was the cost savings to check off something that needs to get done within the district at some point, at a fraction of the cost of others. And even that building is it's not grandiose, and it's functional is what I would put it. When you pull up to our district office and kids enroll there, new students arrive, and or new employees come to be hired. I don't know that it gives us a great look, and how we portray ourselves, to our students and staff, new staff. Again, I don't do this with great desire. We're just looking at that as a possibility for the board to consider, and what we're asking for is the opportunity to engage in negotiations to bring that to the board for further discussion, and consideration.
Can you attempt to find out if there's other options within the community, within the Shippensburg School District, for us other than that building?
I will endeavor to do so, Mr. Scott.
We got umpteen real estate agents around this team, almost many churches. Talk to them and see what's available. If they say there's nothing there, I feel a little comfortable, but the way it is now, someone offers you a part, some land, we say okay. I have a problem with that.
So one thing I'd like to add is on January 17th, when the Board of a Whole was invited to tour this facility, a lot of these questions were answered along with the lot right next to Mr. Burkholder. He also owns that, so there's another like 1.78.
You're not giving that to us.
Again, it is an option, to buy and build as well.
So, that's a good point. But, Mr. August, you talked about cost avoidance, and you're right, and I agree with that. And then I look at things like I talked with Christy about this last summer, and we talked about it at one of these board meetings. One of the ways that we can kind of recoup, and we just went through all these financial presentations, and we have so much in bond allowance without, we're with maintaining level debt service. One thing that we can do for cost avoidance is be able to apply for grants for an athletic facility like the $3 million that Mifflin County got this past summer. But we can't do that because we haven't been able to make any advancements or any decisions on things. There's a $250,000 NFL grassroots grant that literally will pay for your turf. They will give you $250,000 for your turf. That just happened at Wimber School District in the western part of the state. Aliquippa also just got that as well. Their stadium, I think, is going to be open for next year. Aliquippa is not exactly, if you're familiar with Western, it's not a school district that's thriving in funds. Those things are there. We have an executive director position who I think we're all really excited about. If we have a plan, and we can commit to a plan for a stadium who, again, doesn't just support student athletes, but every gym class, the band can use it, so many things, middle school gym classes, high school gym classes, the community. I think that we should really try to plan to have some sort of stage on it at some end, so we could do some community concerts and stuff. That would be awesome. All those things, if we can commit to doing that, we can apply for some grants, and then when we look at that $32 million or whatever that number was that's left tonight, we might be able to say, hey, we might be able to do a stadium for pretty cheap. Because we can work to get funds in other ways, and then we take that other money and it goes right back to the building onto an elementary school or two. And adding, to the high school back here in this corner where we've talked about 6 classrooms out there, possibly being 2 levels from what Damien had told us a couple months ago. Those things are all available to us, and I totally support the administration building. I want to vote yes for that building. 100% I want to. But I cannot do it until that I know that we are willing to make the same kind of commitment for the kids. And with that said, I've asked for this 1,000 times, I'll do it again. We've heard that we need to really, you've said it, these other folks tonight said it, we need to come to decisions on these things. For 13 months, you said dragging or spinning the tires, whatever, not a great thing, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to make decisions. If you tell me that we're meeting next Monday night at 4 o'clock and we'll sit for 7 hours to talk about facilities, I'm down. Sign me up. We can sit here and make decisions based on all this plethora of information we've been given. And I really want to do this sooner rather than later so we can, hey, this is the plan was for 12 point some million in bond allowance. Well, that'd be great because I think we could probably add on to one of the elementary schools for that, a little bit to go to an athletic facility, and we're probably going to offset that because we're going to hire an excellent executive director who's going to be able to find us funds.
I don't disagree with anything you say, Mr. Kressler, and I think you've heard me say defining the project has kind of been the theme of this meeting, and that is my goal, and that includes the athletic upgrades as well. So we once we get that defined, these other things can kick into place. The timing of this would be is not great in that we haven't done that yet. So those numbers are still a mystery. To your point, at this point, if the timing doesn't work, it doesn't work. This is just about having a conversation with that gentleman to get numbers. And I can't make promises about how long that definition will take. But I plan to focus on it and get some options to the board so that we can look at the entire package and say which of our facility needs are we checking off, and move forward with them. So I can't imagine. I've only been on the job for a couple months. I can't imagine the frustration that the board has had with facilities that have gone on for a long time. So I'm aiming to fix that, or at least put options in front of the board to make those decisions, understanding that that there are constraints on what we're going to be able to do across the board. But shovels in the ground feels good when you look at what's going to happen at the middle school. That's progress, and we want to build on that. So.
All right, well, we're not voting on this tonight, obviously. Please, Al's kind of been, I'm sorry, Dr. Moyer's kind of been leading the charge with sort of understanding this project, so if you have concerns or questions about that particular building, please, talk to administration and let's figure it out. All right, so we're now at citizen comment period regarding non-agenda items. We did have one person sign up, but I think we outlasted them, and they left us. So is there anyone else who would like to comment regarding a non-agenda item? Well, it looks like we do have one commenter. So if you'd please tell us your name and whether you live in the district, and we welcome your comment.
My name is Lydia Lyman. I'm a junior at Shippensburg High School. Michael Lyman is my father. He didn't make me come up here. I am here to talk about the previously discussed from the last board meeting, the items of the Terrace Metrics Agreement, Solar Care Solace Service, and Effective School Solutions Agreement. I've looked through all of these, and I think they're great. I, myself, in middle school, struggled very hard with anxiety and depression. I, myself, am still struggling with that, but I was able to get help. But in middle school, I hit it a lot. And I know for a fact that if teachers had asked me what was going on, I would have said, nothing is going on, I'm fine, because that is how I deal with my things. And I know there's a lot of people, a lot of students that are like that. So I know if I had given a screening or a test just asking me about how I was feeling, I would have answered it very honestly, and it would have helped me greatly, because I wouldn't have needed to had that face-to-face of needing a teacher to worry about me. I would have just needed to put in a piece of paper. And I know for a fact that for lots of kids, mental health problems start in middle school or high school, and they don't have the resources to help them. I'm lucky enough to have the resources to ask and help, and others don't. And I think that these, as a student, think that these agreements would be a great help for both teachers, administrators, and especially students. And thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Thank you, Lydia. All right, any other comments? All right, board comments. We're going to go around the horn, and Dr. Lyman, you're just joining us, but you get to be first.
I'm her ride home. Thanks, Lydia. So you all just thank you for the vote earlier, and it will be an honor to serve again with some of you and anew with some of you. I will warn you, you just put a social worker on the board, and so I do plan on bringing up these things that Lydia just talked about. I would like to see those happen. And I will probably be talking to some of you to try to get those screenings back on board, because I really do care a lot about the mental health needs of our students, and that's just part of who I am. So again, thank you for the vote, and I look forward to serving with you.
Thank you, Dr. Lyman. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, young lady, for coming up here and speaking. It takes a lot of guts. I commend you for that, because I don't even know if I could have done it. But thank you very much.
Ms. Wolfinger?
You have an amazing daughter. I was going to say that. It's not easy to talk about your feelings and what you're going through in life. So just a couple shout outs to Marching Band had their final concert last week. And if you were able to attend, then you may have had tears like me. I don't know. They put on a great performance. And to just think that Mr. Magg's career of 33 years here at the district is coming to an end, and to see what the kids did special for him was just an amazing feeling to participate in. Shrek the musical, I had to give another reminder, starts Thursday, and hopefully you guys will all be there, because I will be, because otherwise my band kids would not be very happy with me. And then just finally, Mr. Barnes over at the middle school, him and his staff over there, I just want to say kudos to them. They are doing a fabulous job at the middle school. I am so excited, as was my daughter the day that she came barging through the door saying, "Mom, clubs are coming back." She was so excited that the clubs were coming back to the middle school. You could have thought that she got like a brand new iPad or something. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Keep doing the job that you're doing, because it's really showing over there at the middle school.
Mr. Kressler.
A couple things. One, well, this one's more of a question. This dates back to November, and I should have brought this up in the donation report earlier, Mr. August, I'm sorry. Way back in November, we moved the basketball games that conflicted with the light show over here at Volvo, and I was just curious. I know there was a kind of partnership, like good partners, neighbors, whatever, like a $500 donation that Volvo, I think, was going to make to our kids. Or I think it was going to go toward the transportation funds. I guess my only question would be, have we got that yet? And this kind of sounds dumb, but kids, they're going to be transported either way. We've already planned for that. So if there is a donation that's coming, or if we did, can we maybe use that and treat our kids to something special with a couple $100, if possible? I don't know. Something to look at. Then after that, Becky hit the part about Shrek. And the last thing I want to say is, if you did not watch, Mr. August, I appreciate your video that you sent out last week, because I think that's really important. And in addition to that, if you've gone to any extracurricular events or activities in the last couple weeks, every time I show up to something, Mr. August is around.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I appreciate being active and involved in the community, building good relationships with the community. I think that's super important for all of us. So I just want to say thank you for that.
My pleasure, Mr. Kressler. Thank you.
Mr. Bard.
None this evening.
Mr. Budabaugh.
Welcome back, Mike. Usually when people leave here, they don't return, so I don't understand. But welcome back.
It's pretty extreme circumstances, but thank you.
Mrs. Eberly.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Suiters. Oh, Mr. Suiters. Sorry, you weren't in person, so I forgot you. Any comments, Mr. Suiters? Did we lose you, Charlie?
You got a grandchild.
He's sleeping.
Charlie.
Okay. I would just like to thank you guys for thank you all for going along with the proposal. I certainly don't know how it's going to work, but Mr. August believes that it's going to help us be more effective, and I've bought in, and I'll do my best to help facilitate the process and make us efficient and productive. All right, so we have some information date savers. Of course, you mentioned Shrek. I appreciate that. So Thursday through Saturday, Shrek the Musical, presented by the High School Drama Club. I love our high school musicals. They're amazing, so highly recommend. February 13th, we have another school board meeting. That will be at 8 o'clock, but it will be preceded by probably a couple different committee of the whole meetings, a budget and finance meeting at least, and probably another. So look for the time for our meetings to start on February 13th, but the meeting in which public is invited to comment and we take official action will start at 8 o'clock. February 15th, Act 80 day, no school for students. It would be Wednesday. And then February 20th, the district is closed and how do you say it? Honoring President's Day, in observance of President's Day. And then our second board meeting of February will be February 27th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.